Chapter 1268. I'm going to boil some hot water. You go to the bed and lie down for a while. The room on the left is the bedroom, Baizhuan said as he patted Aju's head again. Aju knew that he wanted her to be obedient. Anyway, she had always been obedient. Without the gravity cuff on her wrist, she would not move around casually. However, wasn't it not good to go to the bedroom as soon as she came? Aju still wanted to say something, but Baizhuan had already gone into the kitchen and started to light the fire. She was still wearing his military uniform, and there was a faint smell, which was slightly fragrant. It did not smell very refreshing, but it faintly revealed a pleasant and refreshing feeling, which made people particularly calm and tranquil. Forget it, if the little brother wanted her to go, she would go. Lying on the bed was more comfortable. As Aju thought about it, she pushed open the bedroom door with the white cat on her head. Other than some men's products like cigarette boxes, there was also a very big Alaskan Malamute, which was glaring at the person who came. Woof woof woof. Why did Master bring a woman back? This doesn't make sense. She must have bad intentions towards Master. Let's see how it will scare her away. Helpless, before Alaskan Malamute could use its deterrence, Aju recognized it at a glance and directly pounced on it. Little Allah, I didn't expect you to become so big. The originally majestic Alaskan Malamute's neck was about to be broken. What little Allah? He was so mighty and strong. Was the reputation of the country's first army dog for nothing? Wait a minute, why did this scene look so familiar? And this woman's strength, woof woof woof. Alaskan Malamute seemed to have suddenly thought of something and barked even more loudly. Master, save me. Hey, you're bullying Aju again. Baizhuan appeared by the door with a tall and straight figure. He held a cup of hot tea in his hand and spoke in disapproval. Alaskan Malamute. Master, who is bullying who? Can't you see that I'm about to die? Aju was still stroking the dog's head with all her might. Alaskan Malamute was already lying there exhausted and began to stick out its tongue. Baizhuan saw that Aju was almost done playing, so he walked over and handed the hot tea to her. There's longan in it. Take a small sip when you drink it. The water is still hot. Yes. Aju nodded and took it. Her other hand was pulled over by Baizhuan and she sat on the side of the bed. Her stomach warmed up in a second. She lowered her head and saw that her little brother had given her a warm water bottle. Baizhuan turned his face to the side and naturally placed his palm on the hot water bag. When he saw that Aju was looking at him, he smiled and turned to kiss the child's eyes. Aju was stunned again. She felt that this time, her little brother seemed to like kissing her a lot. In the past, she could still kiss him back, but now, she could only feel her heart beating faster and faster, her face heating up, and the corners of her eyes turning red. There was a shyness in her eyes that she did not even realize. Seeing her like this, Baizhuan's eyes darkened. He kissed her again with that strength, but this time, the position of his thin lips changed, landing behind her reddened ear. Aju trembled as well. An indescribable feeling spread from her tailbone to her entire body. In the past, when her little brother kissed her, his forehead, eyes, and mouth seemed to be greeting her. But he had never kissed her like this before. Aju widened her eyes at a loss. What greeted her was a pleasant smell and his hot breath by her ear. Aju. Then, he laughed in a low and deep voice. As expected, it's better for others not to be around. Aju's mind was already a little muddled. When she was hugged by him like when she was young, she realized how much she missed such an embrace. At that time, her little brother was sitting on the sofa reading a book while she was sitting on his lap and eating. He was clearly such a clean person, but he never talked about her eating. Was it only when they were separated once that she would occasionally think of the scenes that she had neglected? Ajou lowered her head and held Baijuan's hand. Baijuan paused for a moment and kissed the top of her head with a smile. Sleep with me for a while. Ajou nodded first, then raised her eyes and asked seriously, is there enough time? Little brother still has to go for our military training at 7:30. There's still time. Baijuan hugged her and turned sideways, letting her look at the watch on her wrist. It's 6:05. You can sleep for at least an hour. If that was the case, there was nothing to worry about. However, for some reason, her heart still felt like it was trembling, especially when her nose was filled with the smell of her little brother. Her entire body seemed to be soft. In order to prevent Baijuan from seeing through her abnormality, Ajou simply closed her eyes. It would not be so abnormal if she fell asleep. Baijuan looked at her fair little face. First, he used his fingertips to wipe the dirt on Ajou's face. Then, he covered the hot water bag for her with one hand and hugged her with the other to lean against the headboard of the bed. To him, Ajou was still too young. She was 16 years old, but in reality, she was only 15.5 years old. He did not want to scare her. Even though there was a part of her body that was already very uncomfortable, her breathing was still a little heavy. After the person in his arms really fell asleep, Baijuan touched her cheek. His Ajou had returned to his side. This feeling was really good. The sun shone in from outside the window, and everywhere was warm. Baijuan had forgotten how long it had been since he had experienced such leisure. In fact, the person who could not leave the other party had always been him. It was not Ajou. Alaska was locked outside the door, but it did not dare to scratch the door. It had an expression as if it had seen a ghost. Originally, in the past few years, the little Hercules had not appeared, so its mistress would be replaced. Now it seemed that its master had taken it in back then just to give the little Hercules a wrestling toy. Tricks, full of tricks. Where was the sincerity? Woof. Alaska lay on the ground in despair. When it saw the white cat walking towards it, its back quivered, and with a whoosh, it crawled into the dog hole. Its tail was exposed, and its big head trembled as it hugged it with its paws in shock. It refused to show its head again no matter what. The white cat walked past it and glanced at it. There was a hint of contempt in its eyes. This was the scene that Baijuan saw when he came out. He only raised his eyebrows and did not say anything as he directly walked into the bathroom. His dog was so scared by a cat that it was trembling like a little chick. Alaska. Master, you are not moved by such a scene. Are you still human? Pa, the bathroom door opened again. It turned out that it was Baijuan who had walked out to get a towel. In the future, when you see Ajou, don't come up and hug her. Alaska. You are even jealous of a dog. Master, you are simply immoral. Chapter 1269. On this side, Baijuan was still educating his military dog. On the other side, there were already people staring at him. Other than Vice Captain Zhang, there was also Lu Zidong. The rich young lady held a phone in her hand and said impolitely to the other side of the phone, "Let my father answer the phone." The secretary was a good secretary. He was very professional. Even though he was treated so impolitely, his expression did not turn ugly. He only turned his head and handed the phone to a man in a suit. "President Liu, it's a call from Mississippi." The man was still at the dining table. He was also a powerful person. When he heard that it was a call from his daughter, he immediately picked up the phone. "Zidong, what's wrong? Is it because you're not used to the food in school?" "It has nothing to do with the food." Lu Zidong's tone softened when she was in front of her father. "Dad, can you tell the school to change the instructor for our class?" The man was stunned. Change the instructor. The instructor from the archaeology department is much better than our current instructor. He's also handsome. Lu Zitong lowered her voice as she spoke. I want to gain popularity on Weibo now. Only when the instructor is good-looking can there be a topic. The man laughed again and didn't care at all. I thought it was something serious. They are all the instructors of the same school, so it shouldn't matter which class they take. I'll talk to the school about this matter. It's useless to talk to the school. Lu Zitong anxiously paced her feet. Dad, the professor said that this is an internal decision of the instructors. Help me contact Uncle Lee and ask him to give the order. I've asked around. These instructors are all from the army. His words are useful. The man was amused again. You really have a lot of ideas. All right, I'm eating with your Uncle Lee now. The matter of the instructor is not difficult. We'll go over tomorrow afternoon. Who do you want to be your instructor? Just point it out when the time comes. Okay. Hearing this answer, Lu Zitong's eyes lit up. After hanging up, her eyes narrowed, and a cold smile appeared on her face. Her limelight was not something that anyone could snatch away just because they wanted to. Thinking of this, she called her agency again and told her agent to think of a topic first. When she bought the trending topic the day after tomorrow, she would be able to catch up with a wave of Weibo headlines. The weather outside gradually cooled down. When Aju woke up again, there was no one beside her. The warm water bag on her stomach was still warm. When she sat up, 2 strands of hair stood up on her head. Aju stretched out her hand and tried her best to press it down twice. She could not press it down, so she could only stand up first. She was still holding the hot water bag in her hand. She looked around the living room, but she did not find Bai Juan, so she followed the sound of water and entered the bathroom. As soon as he opened the door, he saw something he shouldn't have seen. Bai Juan seemed to have just taken a shower. His lower body was only wearing a pair of military pants with a black belt tied around it. His upper body was not wearing anything at all, revealing his alluring waistline and well-defined chest. His Apollo's belt could be seen clearly, and even the black mark on the side of his waist could be seen clearly. The toughness and sharpness of a soldier could be seen clearly. There was still water vapor on his body. His head was covered with a pure white towel, and his wet black hair made him look even more out of place in this secular world. His face was handsome. Aju paused for a moment. It was as if there was a small drum hammer beating in her chest. She directly closed her eyes. Like a little monk, her small mouth kept moving. Only when he got closer did he realize that she was chanting Buddhist scriptures. Emptiness is form, form is emptiness, she muttered like a little hamster. Bai Juan was amused by her reaction. A trace of light flashed across his eyes. He was not in a hurry to put on his shirt. He just pulled her over and trapped her at the sink. What are you chanting by yourself? Aju did not have time to react. As soon as she opened her eyes, her gaze met that pair of incomparably deep peach blossom eyes. The black and white were distinct, hazy, and seductive. Moving further down, it was that very seductive chest. Aju's face and neck were also red. Her reaction was direct and simple. Go and put on your clothes first. Hearing Aju's words, Bai Juan could not help but smile. Aju, do you want to touch it? Aju shook her head directly. What a joke. She now knew that men and women were different. She could not touch it casually. Even if she wanted to, she could not touch it. Bai Juan was too bad. He actually used a handsome man trick on her. Fortunately, she studied Buddhism and had good willpower. Otherwise, her cultivation would be ruined. But would Bai Juan listen to her refusal? Of course not. He directly pressed her hand on his chest and the corners of his mouth curled up. "How is it?" At that moment, the unique warmth and dryness of a boy was like steel, jumping in her palm with thumping sounds. That kind of skin was completely opposite to her softness. Only then did Ajou truly understand what a man was. Man. She did not know why, but whenever she thought of this word, it was as if something was about to emerge from her heart. However, at this time, Baizhuan still lowered his eyes. His thin lips were less than 3 centimeters away from her ear, so when he chuckled, even his breathing would follow. Ajou inexplicably felt that the skin that her palm touched was a little hot. She wanted to retract her hand, but was pressed back by Baizhuan. "Do you know how to fold a tofu quilt?" Seeing that Baizhuan had mentioned something that she cared about, Ajou shook her head. She could not do things with edges and corners. She only knew how to wrap the quilt into a ball. She had been like this since she was young. During this military training, it was impossible for her to lower the average score of the class because of the quilt. There are many things to pay attention to when folding a quilt. Baizhuan smiled. Sometimes, it's not that you fold it wrong, but that the quilt itself is too old. But it doesn't matter. This is just the beginning. I can tutor you alone. Ajou was stunned. You can tutor me in folding a quilt. Can't you tutor me at home? Baizhuan's fingers brushed the ends of her hair. We don't have much time today. All right, go wash your face first. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Did that mean that she was coming tomorrow too? Ajou looked at herself in the mirror and thought of the scene she had seen just now. Her face was a little red, and the heat in her palm could not dissipate no matter what. Even though she was washing it with cold water, it seemed that there was still that different touch. Baizhuan did not go out. Instead, he picked up the military training uniform beside him and put it on. Then, he turned his head and wrapped his hands around Ajou's back. He directly held her hands. Don't you know how to use hand soap to wash your hands? With such a posture and the difference in height between the two of them, it was basically Ajou being hugged by Baizhuan. Ajou raised her head. She could only see that pure white chin and handsome side profile. Her breathing stopped for half a beat. Chapter 1270. It was always difficult to have a person behind you, even if this person was the closest to you. However, such an action far exceeded the word close. Ajou did not know what to say. She felt that her fingers on her back, wherever they touched Baizhuan, were all numb. The two people's faces were reflected in the mirror at the same time. Even their postures were very clear. The sound of water flowing rang in their ears. His slender and fair fingers wrapped around the other pair of hands. Just like that, his face was as handsome as jade. This was a scene that would make anyone envious. Li Hailu was right. All of Baizhuan's emotions were used on Ajou. Happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy. Forbearance, possession. As well as infinite patience and gentleness. Many people said that being happy every day was not love. It was just pure liking. Love was like this. He wished he could rub her into his bone marrow, but he was also afraid that he would hurt her a little. He doted on her like a child, but he could not do anything to her. Baizhuan took a deep breath and then pushed her away. His eyes were still smiling. Wash yourself. Remember to apply hand soap. Ajou was very obedient. She muttered, I always know how to apply hand soap. She just did not know what had happened to her little brother all of a sudden. All of a sudden, his breathing seemed to have become especially heavy. Could it be that he had caught a cold? Ajou tilted her head in confusion. In the end, she decided not to think about it. She would wait for the night to properly practice how to fold the quilt. Baizhuan, who had closed the door, stood there with his slender figure. His back was against the wooden door. His black hair was still wet. It fell down just like that, making it impossible to see his expression clearly. Alaska seemed to have sensed the danger coming from its master. Just as it was about to run, Baijuan pressed its head down. When Iju came out, this was the scene she saw. "Little brother. Have you washed your face?" Baijuan did not look at her. Iju nodded and said, "It's all cleaned up. We can go now." Only then did Baijuan raise his eyes. His deep voice was a little hoarse. "My tolerance is indeed not very good." Iju was dumbfounded. How did they get to this topic? "Let's go." Baijuan walked over and led the cute Iju out of the house. He had originally planned to come once a day, but now he decided to change it from once a day to twice a day. Since his patience was not good, he should extend the time he spent alone. Iju still didn't know that Baijuan already had plans to let her come over to stay at night from tomorrow onwards. She was still thinking about how to maintain her composure. The Buddha had once said, "As a qualified abbot of a temple, one must have the determination to reject beauty." The twilight was slowly fading. It was 7:30 p.m., the most important time in every dormitory. All the instructors appeared in front of the dormitory on time and walked from one dormitory to another. Every time they entered a dormitory, they would take a student's blanket and let them see how to press and fold it. However, most of the female students were already drunk when they saw Baijuan's face. As for how Baijuan folded the quilt, was that important? Baijuan also saw that these students were absent-minded. He curled his thin lips and stood up. "Start folding now. If you don't fold well, go downstairs and run 10 laps." The number of laps completely woke the female students up. Although Instructor Bai had a decent appearance and had an outstanding temperament, he was not someone to be trifled with. However, he was very good at scolding people. 10 laps. It was definitely not a joke. Even though they had only interacted with him for a day, they could sense that Instructor Bai was not a person who would show mercy to the fairer sex. In other words, whatever he said, he would usually do it. No one dared to step on Baijuan's bottom line. They immediately had goosebumps and began to move their hands and feet. At that time, they did not know why they were so afraid of Instructor Bai. Later on, reality proved that their fear was completely correct. Because there were a few instructors who seemed to be very afraid of Instructor Bai. It was strange. Shouldn't these people be soldiers of the same level? However, to be honest, Instructor Bai's aura was too shocking. He just stood by the door, wearing white gloves, with his hands crossed in front of his chest. When he looked at people with a faint smile, it also made people feel suffocated. Why did they only think that he was handsome at that time and not realize that he was so inhuman? There's still 1 minute. If you can't fold it well, you'll have to run. Baijuan raised his eyes and looked outside. You probably don't want to go down like this in your pajamas. After all, the school's street lights are so bright. It won't be good if you're accidentally watched by your seniors who like you without makeup. The female students were speechless. This had simply hit their soft spot. How did Instructor Bai think of such an inhumane punishment method? Aju also felt that her little brother's method was too black-bellied, but the effect was still surprisingly good. Rows of angular quilts looked like they had completely won the other major departments. Although there were still many shortcomings, on the whole, they were excellent. Vice Commander Zhang also looked at the results of the examination. His eyes narrowed again and again. It was obvious that he was not convinced. He raised his hand and looked at the watch on his wrist. It's 9:00 now. The camouflage uniforms have been sent to you. I'm sure you've all heard that there will be an emergency assembly tonight. The quality of the assembly will affect the final military training score. In other words, this is the question of the score. Remember what I said. Set an alarm clock at 11 o'clock. Without a doubt, this last sentence revealed the exact time. The students of the performance department looked at each other. Originally, they were not interested in the final score of this kind of military training, but they did not want to be suppressed by any department. Especially after so many years, they had always been more outstanding than the archaeology department. Of course, they had to be first in everything they did. The school would be especially quiet at night. After 10 o'clock, everyone slept very soundly. However, the instructors did not sleep. They were all dressed in straight military uniforms. They stood outside the dormitory and raised their hands to look at the watches on their wrists. Professor Liang was also there. He wanted to do this emergency assembly to let the students know what iron-like discipline was. After all, the school's inheritance was there. Time's up. Blow the whistle. Professor Liang leaned on his walking stick and said. The whistle for the emergency assembly resounded throughout the entire dormitory building. Fortunately, in University A, the first-year dormitory building was separated from the second-year and third-year dormitory building, so that side would not be affected much. Aju was the first to wake up. Just like an ancient cultivation expert, she immediately flipped down from the top bunk and landed on the ground silently. While putting on her military uniform, she shook her roommate awake. Second sister, get up quickly. It's time to gather outside. What do you mean? I'm about to kiss my yang. What did you say? Gather. Chapter 1271. This fancy low cry caused the dormitory to be in a mess in minutes. Everyone was looking for their military pants and coats. Their hair was casually tied up and tied into a ponytail with their hands. In order to be faster, they did not even care about their image. Aju was holding a coat in her left hand, a coat in her right hand, and a few military hats. The roommates put on their coats as they walked. They patted Aju's shoulder, meaning that it was all thanks to her for waking up the sisters. Aju's actions were indeed very dazzling. They did not know where she learned that wind and fire wheel-like technique. In short, she had helped a lot. Every dormitory had basically become a pot of porridge. Only the performing arts department smiled at each other and began to run out of the dormitory. Each of them was dressed very neatly, and their hair was combed very neatly. Even the buttons of their military uniforms were buttoned meticulously. Aju's speed was already very fast, but when she came down, she found that the performing arts department's team had almost taken shape. There was still chaos in front of the dormitory building. The sound of going downstairs still echoed in the stairwell. Everyone was afraid of wasting even a little time. But when they all came down, they found that the others had already gathered. How did they get here so fast? The roommates looked at Aju in surprise. They were not students from the performing arts department. The main reason was that there were really a few people over there who would not go downstairs without putting on makeup. It was a waste of time to put on makeup. How did they get downstairs so quickly? Aju's round tiger eyes also glanced at the performing arts department. The students from the performing arts department stood straight, and even their faces had smiles of disdain for being with them. Vice Captain Zhang looked at the square team that had gathered on his side and took the lead to walk out. He whistled, "Attention!" Whoosh! Every student puffed out their chests. Vice Captain Zhang ran toward Professor Liang and gave a military salute. Performing Arts Department, gathering is complete. Good, good, good. Professor Liang said 3 good words in a row. It was enough to see how happy he was. The problem corps looked at the time on their watches and frowned. Although such a gathering speed was still considered slow for them. But it was impossible for this group of university students. 2 minutes was not even enough time to put on clothes, right? Why did the performing arts department gather so quickly? Lord Bai, there's something fishy about this. The soldiers came over and said to Bai Juan, that Vice Captain Zhang is obviously up to no good. Why is there such a person in the army? Bai Juan's voice was very indifferent. Don't worry about the other troops. Don't forget, we are still on vacation. Are we not going to teach him a lesson? Such obvious cheating. The students and professors may not be able to detect it, but we are all aware of it. Bai Juan smiled again, his eyes a little cold. Yunhu, I said not to bother about the other troops. I didn't say that I wouldn't clean them up. A soldier has to act like a soldier. If we don't clean them up, we will lose face. When the person named Yunhu heard Bai Juan's words, his eyes lit up and he returned to his original position. Anyway, Master Bai had already said so. Sooner or later, Vice Captain Zhang would be defeated. They just had to wait and see. Bai Juan took a step forward. His military boots landed on the ground, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He was not looking at his own team, but at Vice Captain Zhang's side. He chuckled softly, and only the two of them could hear him. The gathering was so sudden. The female students under you actually had time to put on makeup. Vice Captain Zhang, who do you think you are, a fool? Such an unfair comparison should not appear in the army. If it appears, it can only mean one thing. You are not worthy of being a soldier. When he heard the last sentence, the vice captain surnamed Zhang clenched his hands tightly. He also lowered his voice. It's just a field army without a number. How dare you judge whether I am worthy of being a soldier? If you have time, go home and watch more TV. You will know what kind of existence our army is. You can see the shadow of our army everywhere. No matter how dangerous the disaster area is, we will go to support it. It is not something that a three-legged cat like you who has never experienced anything can understand. When Bai Juan heard this, he raised his eyes to look at him again. I don't need you to tell me how good the army is. It's just that the one who went to the disaster area to provide support was not you, but your senior. Don't expect your senior to plant a tree for your junior to take shelter. You are not worthy of this honor. Vice Captain Zhang was stunned by Bai Juan's words. He did not expect this person to know so much about the army. He had indeed not gone to provide any support. There were so many people in the army, and not everyone needed to go. The army itself had to leave some people behind. He did not think that there was anything wrong with him being a reserve army. Vice Captain Zhang had found so many excuses for himself, but he was unwilling to admit that when the mission was not given, he would shrink back. This shrinking back was pointed out by a recruit who was even newer than him. The fire in Vice Captain Zhang's heart burned even more fiercely, and he looked at Bai Juan more and more displeasing to the eye. What do you know about honor? Captain Bai, don't think that just because your military rank is one rank higher than mine, you can really order me around. We are from the army. What about you? Until now, you still don't dare to say the number of your army. Isn't it because you are afraid of being laughed at? Let me give you a piece of advice. You are still young and haven't experienced anything. Don't pretend to be someone big. You are not qualified to talk about honor in front of me. After saying this, Vice Captain Zhang raised his leg and walked towards his battle camp. When the two recruits saw this, they came over and asked him, Vice Captain, what did that guy surnamed Bai say to you just now? Seeing that the students in our class gathered so quickly, he was jealous. Vice Captain Zhang snorted coldly. The recruit laughed when he heard this. This is only the beginning, and he is already jealous. The face-slapping matter is still to come. Tomorrow, the higher-ups will come to check. The shooting competition will start early. When the competition is over, I reckon that he won't have the face to continue with the military training here. He is so arrogant, but in fact, he is just an embroidered pillow. Just wait to be tortured. Vice Captain Zhang did not think much of it. However, if the shooting competition was brought forward, it would be the best for him. It would save that guy surnamed Bai from being cold and indifferent in front of him. He even looked like he did not put him in his eyes. Compared to Vice Captain Zhang's indignation, Bai Zhuan, who should really be angry, was not angry. Instead, his thin lips curled up, and his pair of peach blossom eyes looked brighter than ever. It was so bright that it made the soldiers around him shiver in unison. Chapter 1272. I'm very satisfied with the speed of the students. Professor Liang did not notice the commotion below and said with a smile, "Tomorrow afternoon, there will be a leader coming to our school for an inspection. Students, please show your energy today." According to the usual practice of previous years, the results of the competition will be counted into the total score. Whichever faculty wins will get the rewards they deserve. Military training is to let students show the passion that young people should have. Alright, it's late now. Everyone should go to bed early. There's still a tough battle to fight tomorrow. Professor Liang was indeed a soldier. What kind of competition became a war in his mouth? Every instructor arrived in front of their respective class. The students of the archaeology department were still puzzled. They were more or less dejected. "Instructor, we tried our best to buy time, but we didn't expect that we were still a step too slow." Aju listened and did not say anything. Her big eyes looked at the instructor of the performance department again. This person looked at her little brother and really deserved a beating. Buddha Woolley had said that one could not casually make a move. If one wanted to make a move, one had to find a proper reason. Aju was more or less a little depressed. When would there be a proper reason? Bai Zhuan looked at the students in front of him. His voice was neither indifferent nor indifferent. "Didn't Professor Liang say that tomorrow is the main event? It's just that you're a little slower than others. The points can be recovered sooner or later. What's the rush? Go back to sleep." Did this mean that he would leave the victory and defeat to him? The students did not understand. Didn't they say that their instructor was a recruit? No matter how strong instructor Bai's aura was, it could not be compared to the army, right? They were more or less worried. However, Bai Zhuan had a unique persuasiveness, so the students still obediently disbanded on the spot and went upstairs. Except for Iju. She asked Bai Zhuan very seriously, "Little brother, can I beat up the instructor?" Bai Zhuan paused for a moment and then laughed. "Who do you want to beat up?" "The one who was talking to you just now." Aju looked a little valiant in her military uniform. Bai Zhuan stretched out his hand and straightened her military cap. "He's not worth it. Besides, if you want to be a host, shouldn't you cultivate your character?" Hearing this, Aju's cheeks also puffed up. "Last time, Master also said that my temperament wasn't enough. He even said that I shouldn't beat people up casually. He was afraid that others wouldn't be able to withstand my fist." Bai Zhuan was speechless. His master's worry was very reasonable. "However, when did you see Master?" Aju brushed her hair. "Just a while ago, I went to the mountain and said that I wanted to inherit his legacy. He chased me down and gave me 2 steamed buns. He said that I was deceiving my master and destroying my ancestors." Li Hailu coughed softly at the side. "Aju, your master hasn't passed away yet, and you're going to inherit his legacy. If this isn't deceiving the master and destroying the ancestors, then what is? From the looks of it, master doesn't intend to hand over the temple to me." Aju kicked the stone under her feet. "I'm going to wait for another 4 years. If he still doesn't agree after I finish college, I'll go up the mountain and snatch it. Hearing this, Li Hailu was completely silent. He looked in Bai Juan's direction. It was almost as if he was saying, "Are you not going to do anything about it?" Unexpectedly, Bai Juan only laughed softly. "When the time comes, I will help you." "Yes." Ajul looked very happy. Li Hailu was speechless. "Your master raised a pair of disciples like you. He probably won't be able to live a peaceful life for the rest of his life." "And Master Bai, have your principles been fed to the dogs? You spoil women so much that you have no bottom line." Bai Juan said that, but in fact, he knew very well that no one could enter that temple a second time. Ajul was clearly an exception. She had a Buddhist fate. If Master really didn't like Ajul, he wouldn't have given her 2 steamed buns when he chased her down the mountain. In other words, the successor in his heart had always been Ajul. Thinking of this, Bai Juan narrowed his eyes. He could fulfill the dream of his beloved girl, but he would not really let Ajul become a monk. This was a matter of principle. "Little brother." Ajul tilted her head and looked at Bai Juan's deep eyes. She frowned. "What's wrong with you?" Bai Juan's face returned to its usual faint smile. "Nothing. I'm just thinking about you moving out." "Moving out?" Ajul's eyes were confused. "I'm not moving out." Bai Juan patted her head. "I'm worried about you living in school." Li Hailu was speechless. Ajul was invincible in the entire school. What was there to be worried about? "Master Bai, your reason was too far-fetched." Ajul also felt that she had nothing to worry about. Bai Juan let out a long sigh. His eyes moved slightly, and his gaze actually sounded a little lonely. "Or are you saying that after being separated for a few years, you don't want to live with little brother anymore?" Li Hailu was speechless. Fuck, this was even a psychological attack. Of course, Ajul couldn't bear to see her little brother like this. She immediately grabbed Bai Juan's hand back. Her beautiful little face was very serious. "I'll move out after the military training." "There's no need to wait until the military training is over. I've already written the application for day school for you. You can just hand it to the homeroom teacher tomorrow." Bai Juan smiled faintly and handed Ajul a handwritten piece of paper. Ajul more or less understood that her little brother had used a trick on her. However, she knew even more clearly that her little brother really wanted her to live with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the time to write such an application. But there was one thing, she was very uncertain about herself. What if she wanted to push him down again while she was asleep? Sigh, it was really troublesome to be a qualified candidate for the temple's abbot. She always had to resist all kinds of temptations. Her biggest temptation now was her little brother. She always felt that after coming back this time, her little brother's entire body was emitting the unique charm of a man. That's right, a man who was very good at flirting with girls. She didn't know if she could control it. The next morning, Ajul was still thinking about this problem. When she saw Bai Juan, who was wearing a military uniform, walking towards her, she inexplicably remembered the scene where he hugged her from behind and washed her hands. It seemed that everywhere was hot. Bai Juan did not know what Ajul was thinking. He only took a gun with one hand. "Today, we'll talk about shooting." Ordinary students would not be able to come into contact with shooting during military training. However, University A was different. They had it every year. This was also the training that the students looked forward to the most. After all, everyone had a desire to hold a gun in their hearts, regardless of whether it was a boy or a girl. However, when they really came into contact with a gun, they realized that that thing was simply too heavy. The army did not provide many guns. There were only 3 guns in each class, and there were no bullets in them at all. They let them take turns to hold them and learn the posture first. Chapter 1273. Huff, huff, I can't take it anymore. This gun is so heavy. How did instructor Bai pick it up with one hand? You shouldn't ask instructor Bai how to pick it up. You should ask Aju how she can carry one in one hand and still do it properly. Even the boys can't do it. Wooly, Aju is better than the boys at anything. She's just so manly. Aju's actions had indeed stunned many people. Bai Juan was afraid that it would dampen the enthusiasm of the male students in the class, so he took the gun from Aju's hand and gave her a mission to buy water for the entire class. Of course, other than the fact that Aju was too capable, Bai Juan did not want her to lie on the ground and learn the shooting posture that she already knew when she was not feeling well. Bai Juan was a sniper. One look at Aju's actions and he knew that she had learned it before. When she was young, Bai Juan had never taught her how to hold a gun. Now it seemed that it was her family who had taught her. Her technique was very experienced. Such a person would be top-notch even in the army. His Aju had really changed a lot when he was not around. Little brother, should we distribute the water now? Aju raised her delicate little face. Even though she was wearing a military uniform, she still gave people a silly and cute feeling. It was probably because the 2 strands of hair on her head could not be suppressed no matter how hard she tried. Bai Juan looked at her and the corners of his mouth curled up. Distribute it all. You can't drink it. I brought you a thermos with red dates in it. Go and drink the water in my thermos. Because Aju had just exercised, her small face was flushed red. She obediently nodded and wanted to run. The students had all dispersed to rest. All their attention was on the mineral water. Seeing this, Bai Juan turned sideways and pulled Aju back. He lowered his voice and asked, "How's the packing?" "What is it?" Aju was a little puzzled. Bai Juan reminded her, "The things in the dormitory. It's all packed." When Aju spoke, she was still trying her best to suppress the hair on her head. Bai Juan held it in for a long time before he did not hug such a cute girl into his arms. He said in a hoarse voice, "After the training ends, I have a meeting here. Someone will pick you up then. I'll go there myself." Aju felt that it would be inconvenient to send another person. Anyway, that place was close to the school. Bai Juan also did not want anyone other than Aju to enter his apartment. He paused and took out a bunch of keys from his pocket. "If there's any problem, call me." "All right." When Aju took the key, Li Hailu happened to pass by this place. He walked back and forth twice. When Aju picked up the thermos and started to drink water, Li Hailu directly put his hand on Bai Juan's shoulder. "Master Bai, I wanted to ask you yesterday. You want to kidnap Aju to live with you so much. Are you trying to hide her?" Originally, he thought that it would take some time for him to admit it. Unexpectedly, Bai Juan only glanced at him indifferently and said, "Yes, so this place is very inconvenient for you to visit." After Li Hailu heard Bai Juan's words, he realized that he was the one who was tricked in the end. This also meant that he couldn't find an excuse to go to that house in the future. If he had known earlier, he would have called Shaolin. A person like him who did not know how to use idioms should have consulted the Ministry of Foreign Affairs first. What a mistake. At this moment, the bell rang. It was noon, and it was time for the teachers and students to go to eat. Because there were people coming from above, the instructors all had other places to go, so they did not appear in the cafeteria on the 2nd floor like yesterday. Professor Liang personally received the group of people. When Vice Captain Zhang and the others saw the people who came, they all respectfully saluted. The soldiers stood at the back of the team and looked at each other. They did not say anything, but the meaning in their eyes was basically understood. Who is this? I don't know. It seems like he has a big background. He doesn't even have as many ears as Master Bai. Is this a big background? If he really had a big background, I would have seen him at my mother's place long ago. Don't forget what she is in charge of. In my mother's heart, Master Bai is the most important. Your mother likes Master Bai so much that she almost married you to him. That won't do. I'm a man. You still know that you're a man. Bai Juan was the leader. Even if the people who came were not in line with them, they still had to show respect. Seeing that the few troublesome people kept shaking their heads, their eyes directly swept over. The soldiers left and stood up straight. They no longer exchanged glances. In any case, they were under old Zhao's protection. They were not afraid of officials. At most, when they did something bad, they would leave old Zhao's name behind. Achoo! President Zhao, who had countless years on his shoulder, sneezed heavily. He was still commanding the battle when he suddenly felt a chill on his back. He pulled the adjutant beside him over. How are those bastards in school? The adjutant was also a little stunned by the sudden question. They should be fine. Good is good, bad is bad. What do you mean they should be fine? President Zhao was very angry. The adjutant comforted him. President, don't worry. Master Bai is the person who is about to take over your position. No one can bully them. Do you think I'm worried that they will be bullied? President Zhao scratched his prickly head. I keep feeling that something is not right. The army has already informed them that they will be the ones going over, right? The adjutant paused for a moment. This. Master Bai and the others' identities have always been very special. They can't reveal their numbers, right? So you don't know. Yes, it's good that you don't know. President Zhao thought for a moment and stood up again. Good my ass. Without that identity, these bastards are even more reckless. The adjutant continued to comfort him. It's okay, President. At most, they can still say that they came out from under you. President Zhao was speechless. Everyone, sit down. Don't stand. Everyone sit down so that you won't be reserved. At the school's reception desk, the man in military uniform came to speak. He pressed his palm down. Vice Captain Zhang seemed to be very obedient to him. As soon as he opened his mouth, the few soldiers on the other side all sat down. Their movements were very orderly, which made Bai Juan and the others seem a little slow. There were a total of 6 people in the problem army. Other than Bai Juan, 3 of them came from Sharp Blade, and 2 of them were about to enter Sharp Blade. They were all people who had carried out many secret missions. To be honest, other than the orders of Bai Juan and some important leaders, they rarely listened to anyone, which was why their reaction was a little slow. Vice Captain Zhang snorted mockingly, thinking that they were new recruits who had not seen much of the world. Chapter 1274. The dishes were all served, and the people who came did not do anything special. The dishes on the table were all from the staff cafeteria. Professor Liang also took the walking stick beside him. He sat there and raised the wine glass in his hand. They exchanged pleasantries happily and harmoniously. After a while, Li Yanfeng smiled again. I heard that the students from the Performing Arts Department are all doing well in this military training. Which instructor is leading them? When Vice Captain Zhang saw that he had been called out, he first looked at Bai Juan and the others proudly. Then, he stood up and saluted the people at the table. Good, good. Li Yanfeng seemed to be very happy. He tilted his head and asked his good friend beside him, not bad. Let Tong Tong come in first and let her take a good look at her. That child usually keeps a low profile and doesn't want the students in the school to know her identity. Lu Xian thought that his daughter was a worry-free person, but he didn't know how she behaved outside. Li Yanfeng heard this and glanced at the soldier beside him. Go and bring in the little girl waiting outside the door. Tell her that Uncle Li and her father want to see her. Professor Liang knew Lu Zitong's identity. He chuckled and said, President Lu is here to see his daughter today. As a parent, I'm always worried. Lu Xian raised his wine glass and clinked it with Professor Liang. Vice Captain Zhang listened at the side, but his expression changed a little. Long before he came to the military training, he had heard that the students of University A might be able to meet someone with a strong background by chance. He was also familiar with the name Lu Zitong. She was an influential figure in his team. He didn't look like an ordinary university student, but he didn't expect her family background to be so good. The more Vice Captain Zhang thought about it, the happier he became. Lu Zitong was in his class. Just this relationship alone was of great help to him. The soldiers all acted as if they did not hear him. They lowered their heads and ate the rice in their bowls. Their eating manners were also different. Some of them were especially forthright, displaying the energy of a soldier to the fullest. Some of them were like rich young masters who were sloppy. Of course, there was also someone like Bai Juan. No matter what he ate, it made people feel like he was eating a French meal. Even his fingertips were filled with bone-chilling elegance. This was the scene that Lu Zitong saw when she came in. Her bright eyes looked at Bai Juan reluctantly. Anyone could tell what she meant. Li Hailu sat at the side and frowned heavily. The problem armies were even more stunned. What was going on? Did she take a fancy to their Lord Bai? Wasn't this courting death? Master Bai had a wife. Although his wife was a little monk, she was still an adorable little monk. Master Bai would not give any woman other than his wife any face. It was even crueler than the cold wind sweeping the fallen leaves. Lu Xian coughed heavily when he saw his daughter staring at an officer. Only then did Lu Zitong turn around with a smile. She said graciously, Dad, Uncle Li, Professor Liang. Sit down. Li Yanfeng said to Lu Zitong, Your dad was just saying that you don't eat well. They were relatives to begin with. In addition, the two families had supported each other for so many years, so of course, they were close. Lu Zitong glanced in Bai Juan's direction and said, Uncle Li, I won't sit. You adults are talking about time. As a student, I'm breaking the rules by sitting here. Moreover, the instructors are still sitting over there. You've grown up and know the rules. Li Yanfeng smiled and raised his hand again. Vice Captain Zhang, come over here for a moment. Vice Captain Zhang immediately put down his chopsticks and walked over when he saw that his regiment commander was calling him. You've trained people well. Change places with that instructor just now and lead them. Li Yanfeng's words were beautiful. After hearing this sentence, Vice Captain Zhang was completely dumbfounded. Change places. What did he mean? Let him go to the archaeology department? He was just happy that Lu Zitong was in their class, but now he was transferred to another department. Vice Captain Zhang's eyes widened as he followed Li Yanfeng's gaze. When he saw that the person he was talking about was none other than Bai Juan, the fire in his heart burned even more fiercely. However, the order was given by his superior, so he had no choice but to obey. He only looked in Bai Juan's direction with bloodshot eyes and gritted his teeth. He did not say yes or no. From the moment Lu Zitong came in, Li Yanfeng had already guessed which instructor she wanted to change. However, it was inevitable that such a thing would have a bad effect if a girl said it, so it was better for him to say it directly. As expected, after Lu Zitong heard Li Yanfeng's words, she looked at Bai Juan's godlike noble and handsome face. Her cheeks turned even redder, and there was a faint hint of shyness. Vice Captain Zhang also saw what was going on. Of course, he would not question anything in front of everyone. He clenched his fists, lowered his head, and said, "Yes." A voice slowly sounded from the other side. It was neither cold nor indifferent, but it was a little like an ancient sword being unsheathed. It carried a slight vibration. The military training will last for 10 days. The class has been set since the beginning. Changing people halfway will only affect the students' emotions. Commander Li is now proposing to exchange officers. Is it because of a military order or because of personal reasons? The last sentence made Li Yanfeng feel a little embarrassed. He only opened his mouth and laughed. Whose soldier is this? Not bad. He dares to speak. The officers looked at each other. In the end, the captain reported in a low voice, "Commander Li, they are not from our army." Not from the army. Then they were the few people who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. When Li Yanfeng thought of this, he was stunned for a moment. He still could not figure out the identity of the other party, but when the chief picked up the phone, he was also present. He saw that the chief was very respectful to the person on the phone, so it could be seen that one or two of them were involved. Lu Zitong saw that he was hesitating and called out in a low voice, "Uncle Li, Lu Xian," and saw that Li Yanfeng was in a difficult position, so he interrupted his daughter, "Zitong, if there's nothing else, you should go and eat first. You still have military training in a while. Your Uncle Li and the others still have serious matters to discuss." Dad. Lu Zitong still wanted to say something. Lu Xian and lowered his voice. "Go quickly." When Lu Zitong heard this, her expression turned ugly. Only then did she reluctantly raise her feet and walk out of the door. She had never thought that even Uncle Li would not make her wish come true. Before she came, she had already made an agreement with the people in the dormitory that this time, she would definitely let Bai Juan be their instructor. Now that things had turned out like this, and when she saw that Bai Juan did not even look at her, Lu Zitong only felt that she had been slapped in the face in public. She felt indescribably uncomfortable. She had already done this, but why did that instructor Bai still look at her as if she did not exist? Chapter 1275. In the hall, the atmosphere had yet to recover. Li Yanfeng and Bai Juan looked at each other. Only then did they feel that those long and narrow black eyes looked somewhat familiar. But for a moment, he forgot where he had seen them before. Where exactly were they? Bai Juan did not give him time to see clearly. He just sat back down, holding the wooden chopsticks in his hand. He looked calm as if nothing had happened just now. Vice Captain Zhang thought to himself that it was fine if this person was usually arrogant, but he was still so arrogant in front of Commander Li. He was really stupid as a soldier. It was good that Bai Juan did not change. Whichever class had Lu Zitong, the results of that class would not be too bad. The most important thing was not the results, but being noticed by the higher-ups. Vice Captain Zhang had a lot of thoughts, but no matter how much he thought, he could not hide the embarrassment in his heart. The matter that Commander Li had mentioned just now was simply an insult to him. Even if he stayed in the current class, it was as if Bai Juan had given it to him. What was this? He was being bullied by a random soldier from God knows where. The more Vice Captain Zhang thought about it, the gloomier his face became. His eyes were full of gunpowder as he looked at Bai Juan. How could Li Yanfeng not see the undercurrent below? He quickly restrained his thoughts and laughed. "I heard from your captain that there is a shooting competition in the afternoon. President Liu and I won't be leaving today. You guys have to perform well and not embarrass our army." Yes. When Vice Captain Zhang said this word, it was obvious that he used a lot of strength. There were a few people from the army who did not like Bai Zhuan and the others. At this moment, they were all looking in their direction. For no reason, there was an additional sense of provocation. The problem soldiers, on the other hand, did not think much of it. It was not a team competition. With only Master Bai around, they did not need to appear at all. One had to know that Master Bai's code name was Viper. Hiding, attacking, and not missing a bullet. Vice Captain, eat more. Show them what you're capable of later. Someone picked up some food into Vice Captain Zhang's bowl with his chopsticks. It was as if they had already won. Vice Captain Zhang was even more immodest. He sneered, "It's time to let them know what they're capable of." The meal was not eaten very quickly. After all, there were still people sitting on the table. Especially with Professor Liang around, it was inevitable that they would say a few words. There was a long lunch break at a university. The moment Lu Zitong entered the dormitory, someone asked her, "Zitong, how's the situation? Is it because our instructor has changed?" Uncle Li didn't agree. After Lu Zitong finished speaking, she added, "He said that Vice Commander Zhang is a good soldier in their army. With him leading us, we can get a high score in the final round. Also, there will be a shooting competition in the afternoon. The students and instructors will participate. How long have we been holding guns? How many points have we scored? The key to winning or losing will depend on the instructors. Vice Commander Zhang is famous in the army for shooting. With him, we have already won." After I heard that, I decided not to change the instructor. If I were to change Vice Captain Zhang to the archaeology department, when they win, wouldn't they go to the heavens? After hearing Lu Zitong's explanation, her roommates also felt that it was reasonable. However, they said, "I really want to take a closer look at Instructor Bai. I always feel that he is particularly handsome even when he walks." Alright, now is not the time to be infatuated. How can military training compare to being able to suppress those people from the archaeology department all the time? Someone said, "Look at them. Now that there's a good-looking person over there, they're starting to show off." On the forum, they even said that the great skipper is better looking than Zitong. At this point, that person also noticed that Lu Zitong was around and immediately changed his words. How can she be compared to Zitong, right? Yes, it's just because Instructor Bai is in the limelight. Another roommate immediately said, "Just wait. This time, we'll suppress the archaeology department. No one will talk nonsense anymore." Lu Zitong was obviously unhappy. If it was just that she couldn't get a person, it wouldn't be a big deal. She was going to be a superstar in the future. What she needed the most now was popularity in all aspects. Although it was rare to see someone as classy as Bai Zhuan in the entertainment industry, she still knew what to do. However, it was fine if Instructor Bai ignored her, but he had to pay extra attention to that great skipper. This kind of differential treatment not only stole her limelight, but also made Lu Zitong jealous. Since Instructor Bai didn't want to bring them along, then let him and the archaeology department lose face together. With Uncle Li around, the extra points in this shooting competition would definitely belong to them. At that time, they could also change the original trending topic on Weibo. That great skipper, they would let her get away as far as possible. Zhu didn't take the competition in the afternoon seriously. With little brother around, would they lose? Obviously not. Moreover, to be honest, even if little brother wasn't around, they wouldn't lose. Zhu looked at her hands. With a force, all the luggage was carried into the house by her. Little Alaska was still excited when it heard the lock, thinking that it was its master. However, when it saw Zhu's shadow, it immediately exploded and directly drilled into its kennel. Its speed was like a bullet that had left a gun. Aju raised her eyebrows and brought the box in. Just as she tidied up the things, she received Bai Juan's WeChat message. Have you arrived? Aju saw that it was in the form of text. After thinking for a while, she felt that it was definitely inconvenient for him to speak. She also used text to reply, I'm here. When little Allah saw me, it buried its head in the kennel. No matter how I called it, it wouldn't come out. Bai Juan was almost done eating. After looking at the WeChat message, he immediately thought of why his beloved dog was like this. Aju asked seriously, does it not like me living here? After all, dogs and cats are territorial. Bai Juan looked at the last sentence and calmly replied with a few words, it's shy. Shy. When Aju saw this answer, she smiled happily. She dragged little Alaska out and rubbed its head with all her might. So you're shy. If little brother didn't say it, I wouldn't have known. Don't be shy. I'll live here from now on. Little Alaska almost spat out a mouthful of dog blood. Master, is it really okay for you to lie through your teeth like this? Do you really not know why I didn't come out? You actually want this Hercules to live here from now on? Woof, there's no way to live in the future. Aju thought for a moment and took a photo of herself and the dog. She directly sent it to Bai Juan. It was pulled out by me. It shouldn't be shy anymore, right? Bai Juan glanced at his beloved dog, who seemed to have exhausted all its strength. He curled his lips and smiled. Then, he lowered his head and replied. Chapter 1276. Yes, I'm not shy anymore. These 5 words were very calm and unhurried. She did not feel ashamed at all. Alaska was speechless. Master, I really didn't expect you to be such a master. Don't bully us dogs for being illiterate. After Aju saw that reply, she held the dog's face and rubbed it hard. Alaska was no longer in the mood to say anything. It stretched out its paws and cosplayed as a bear. Aju squatted beside it. Seeing that it seemed to be hungry, she quickly mixed a plate of dog food for Alaska. Then, she filled it with water from the basin beside it. In the end, Alaska was satisfied with the food and began to rub against the ground. To be honest, other than being a little stronger, Hercules was very domestic in other aspects. Compared to the women it had seen before who only had eyes for its master, she was much better. Little Allah, if you're thirsty, drink the water over there. Also, you can't eat the dog food casually. When little brother and I come back in the afternoon, we'll bring you ham sausages, Aju instructed Alaska as she went to change her shoes. When Alaska heard the words ham sausages, its ears pricked up. One had to know that although its master was a good master, he was very careless when it came to food. They had been raised in the army and had already developed a rough stomach. It was fine as long as they had something to eat. Only when it barked at the ham sausages would its master be merciful and buy it 1 or 2. In the army, there were canned foods to eat, but it personally preferred ham sausages. Aju knew that it wanted to eat just by looking at it. She smiled and rubbed its dog face again. Wait for it. We'll be back after training. At this moment, Alaska was both painful and happy. It was still good to have a mistress at home. In the future, it would not have to eat those dry food with its master anymore. Bai Juan indeed did not care about food. In the past, he was such a noble young master in the military. After going to the army, he did not say a word about eating a cold pot of rice. At that time, Chief Shao was surprised for a long time. In the end, he silently watched him swallow the dry rice grains one by one. He knew that this kid had a great future. He was flexible and did not want to be special. He was not only like the Bai family, but also like the Tang family. After all, if he asked to heat up the rice with his status, this request would not be too much. When Bai Juan entered the army, the old man did not say anything, but his heart was half happy and half sad. He no longer had a son, so how could he bear to let his only grandson go to the border again? It was not that old Master Bai had not thought of retreating. As long as Bai Juan said no, he could immediately use his connections to get him to come back. However, from the beginning to the end, Bai Juan's patience and responsibility had already exceeded the imagination of too many people. One call a year. In the content of the call, other than hearing him tell him to take care of his body, old Master Bai was also inquiring about Iju. In the first year, Bai Juan was seriously injured and the border was very cold. Old Master Bai had also asked, "Why don't you come back first?" There was silence on the other side of the phone for a while before a voice came through. "Grandpa, I'm needed here." The word grandfather made old Master Bai's eyes turn red. At that time, Bai Juan was only 18 years old. 18 years old at this age was originally the most youthful, brilliant, carefree age. However, Bai Juan carried too much on his back. Moreover, I can't run away at the last minute. Only when I become strong enough can I protect the people I want to protect without any scruples. Grandfather is old, and Iju is still young. With just a few words, old Master Bai knew that he had changed his grandson's mind. As a soldier, Bai Juan was very qualified. It was precisely because he was too qualified that old Master Bai felt guilty towards him. However, such a person could not tell the whole world what he had done. This was because the mission they carried out was too confidential. He could not say who he had protected. He could not say where he had gone. He could not say what had happened to the injuries on his body. Bai Juan had too many secrets. He had thought about it countless times. Fortunately, he had met Iju. For soldiers like them, some of them were seriously injured and could not continue. They could only find a girl when they retreated. They had to give the girl a sense of trust and security. However, there were so many things that could not be said, which caused some unhappiness. Even his family had to be hidden from him. Bai Juan had seen his comrades who had gone on blind dates in his hometown. Sometimes, his blind date did not even know that the blood flowing in his body might have once saved this country. He would only ask if he had a house in the school district. Of course, this was only a part of it. Bai Juan was not cynical. He was just grateful that he had met such a person since he was young. No matter what you become, no matter how long you disappear, she will not change. She will only wait for you in the same place. Thinking of this, Bai Juan lowered his head and looked at the WeChat photo on his phone. The corners of his mouth could not help but curve up. Vice Captain Zhang caught his smile and snorted disdainfully. "Just you wait. You won't be able to smile in the afternoon." His voice was lowered, but the provocation was real. When the soldiers beside him heard this, they all wanted to throw down their bowls and chopsticks, stand up, and teach him a lesson on the spot. Bai Juan blocked with his arm, his expression very calm. The soldiers looked at each other. Even though their chests were heaving up and down, they were very obedient and immediately sat back down in their original positions. Damn it, this Zhang guy was simply asking for a beating. Master Bai was not around, so they did not care about the military rules. They would beat him up first. Anyway, even if he caused trouble, his father would block it. The reason why Chief Xiao could not leave Bai Juan was also because of the temperament of this group of ancestors. The soldiers were good soldiers. They were not afraid of death, and they were also obedient enough. It was just that sometimes, they were like Tibetan mastiffs, biting whoever they caught. Other than Bai Juan, no one could tame them. Li Yanfeng and Professor Liang also noticed the commotion here. They put down their cups and looked over. What's going on? The person who asked was Li Yanfeng. Vice Captain Zhang stood up and said, reporting, the people on Captain Bai's side can't wait any longer. They want to have a good shooting competition with our army. Hearing this, Li Yanfeng laughed. He pointed at them and said to Professor Liang, when I was young, I was just like them. If there was a competition in this army, I would definitely be full of vigor and not give in to anyone. Professor Liang also smiled. The army needs people with vigor. It's about time. Tell them to go down and prepare. Change their clothes and bring their guns. Tell all the classes to gather. Li Yanfeng also raised his hand to look at the time on his watch. The lunch break was indeed over. He said to the people below, go, don't embarrass us soldiers. Yes. As soon as Vice Captain Zhang raised his hand, he gave a smug look to the soldiers. However, what he did not expect was that the group of people actually laughed at this time. They sat casually in their seats and laughed casually, as if they did not take him seriously at all. Chapter 1277. Bai Zhuan took the military cap beside him and stood up as well. He only said the word "go" to the few people behind him. The soldiers were not worried now. The shooting competition was about to begin, so what were they worried about? All of them left wearing military caps. As soon as the assembly signal sounded, each class formed rows of square teams as quickly as possible. The students were all wearing camouflage uniforms. Regardless of whether they were boys or girls, they all looked as if they already had the toughness that they should have. Jill was also standing in the middle of the team. Her waist-length black hair was tied into a ponytail by her. There was no gravity buckle on her wrist. Instead, she was wearing a black wristband. She had an indescribable handsomeness. Everyone should have heard that we have a competition today. Bai Zhuan faced the square team of their class and stood tall and straight. A shooting competition. All the students knew this, but no one expected it to come so soon. Instructor Bai, we can't even hold our guns properly. The performance department started a day earlier than us. It seems that since yesterday, their instructor has let them touch guns. What should we do now? There are more girls in our department than in theirs this year. It's probably going to be difficult. Bai Zhuan listened to the students' worries, but the expression on his face did not change at all. On the other side, Li Yanfeng and the others had already walked over. They were all leaders, so they specially came down to take a look. Lu Xian was also there. He was wearing a suit, which was enough to see his business aura. When he walked to the performance department, he paused and looked at Lu Zidong. Lu Zidong was originally standing in the front row. She was not tall, but because she was good-looking, people ignored the problem of her height. Li Yanfeng also stopped and specially adjusted Lu Zidong's military cap. He laughed loudly and said, "Perform well, understand?" "Yes, Uncle Li." Lu Zidong's entire face lit up at this moment. What was the big deal about being rejected in the cafeteria just now? Looking at it now, all the teachers and students in the school still had to look at her in amazement. "Oh, you." Lu Xian reminded her again, "Don't embarrass your Uncle Li." Lu Zidong smiled and said, "I got it. Dad, you'd better leave quickly." Lu Xian shook his head and turned his face to say a few words to Professor Liang. After the group of them left, the performing arts department blew up. "Zidong, that's the commander of the army. You know him. His background is too strong." Lu Zidong smiled reservedly, enjoying the envious looks from all around her. She didn't say anything. But just this scene alone made the performing arts department feel even more confident. This time, the archaeology department is not dumbfounded. Previously, I thought that their instructor was handsome and felt uncomfortable. But now, it seems that no matter how handsome he is, his ability is not good enough. Our instructor Zhang is the one with the most combat experience in the army. He's also very good at shooting. We've also asked around about the Bai guy. It turns out that he's not from the army at all. I don't know which random army he's from, but he suddenly came in without any ability at all. Although they were from different faculties, because they were the first team, they were now 2 classes next to each other. As they spoke, the people from the archaeology department could hear them. All of them were extremely angry. After all, this was how it was during military training. No one was willing to hear others badmouth their instructor. However, when they turned around, they saw that Bai Juan did not have any emotional fluctuations. They did not know what to do. At this moment, a whistle was blown from above. The general idea was for all the instructors to gather. Aju's roommates coughed a few times and quickly seized the time to ask, "Instructor Bai, the competition is about to start. Don't you have anything to tell us?" Bai Juan curled his thin lips and picked up the long spear beside his feet with one hand. "You just have to do your best. Leave the winning to me." It was just a few words. His tall and straight back was like an ancient war god. Especially the moment he raised the spear. Everyone was stunned by his last sentence, "Leave the winning to me." I'm shocked. He was indeed handsome. No instructor would instruct the students like this. It felt like they were being protected. In fact, in the hearts of Bai Juan and the soldiers, their students were supposed to be protected. They were stationed at the border and risked their lives. Wasn't it so that the people who lived there could live a simple and happy life? It was precisely because of this that they could not bear to see some people use their family background to suppress others on campus, or some people use military training as an excuse to seek a future for themselves. They could not care less about what they could not see. Since they had seen it, they would fight to their heart's content. After the officers had gathered, there were a total of 6 classes in the archaeology department. They were all from Bai Juan's side. There were also a few other departments. Nearly 17 classes were all soldiers from the army. After all, time was limited. 5 students from each class would fall out and participate in the overall competition. In the end, the total score would be calculated. The students would compete first, and then the instructor would finish the competition. According to the order of the score, the most outstanding department would be evaluated first, and then the shooting class would be evaluated. The class with the most points would add 10 points when the total was summed up. From this, it could be seen the importance of the shooting competition. Moreover, at this point, it was no longer as simple as the score. It was a competition of face. There were also rules for the student competition to show fairness. Each class had 2 girls and 3 boys. Of course, Aju was in the competition team. After all, the students of the archaeology department were still confident in her strength. It was really not easy for a girl to pick up a gun, so they did not expect Aju to really hit the target. As long as she did not lose too badly, it would be fine. On the other side was Lu Zitong. As soon as she stood out, someone on the other side said, "Zitong just said that Commander Li usually teaches her how to hold a gun. The winner of this competition is already set in stone." I advise some people not to overestimate themselves. Do you think that shooting is a wrestling match? If you can win just by relying on brute force, then what's the difference between you and a peasant worker with a brick? When the archaeology department heard this, bursts of fire rose in their throats. They were clearly talking about Iju. That tone was extremely unpleasant to hear. It was simply mocking. Aju also raised her eyes and glanced over indifferently. They did not know if it was their imagination, but they felt that those originally round eyes actually burst out with a coldness that could not be ignored. They must have seen wrongly, right? The few girls from the performance department were stunned. Before they could figure out what was going on, the whistle sounded again. Students participating in the shooting competition, listen up. All of you, step out. Swoosh. Rows and rows of people appeared. The officer gave another order, turn left, walk in unison. Chapter 1278. Lu Zidong took these 2 steps with great confidence. The students' shooting requirements were obviously different from the instructors. It was impossible for them to walk to the shooting range with their guns. This was too much of a burden for them. The method used was to directly set up the gun at the shooting distance and lower the butt of the gun. As long as they could pick up the gun, put it on their shoulders, and crawl to shoot. In other words, no matter how strong the grade skipper was, she would not be able to use it in this segment. Lu Zidong walked to her position and glanced in Aju's direction. The meaning on her face was very obvious. It was obvious that she did not like Aju. Aju did not even look at her. She turned the black wristband on her other hand and was looking down at her feet. Unlike the others, she looked a little confused. The smile on Lu Zidong's face became even wider as she raised her eyebrows. Everyone, listen up, get down. There was another swoosh. Everyone got down, their eyes on the same level as the gun. When it came to shooting, if one did not have talent, what they practiced was their usual familiarity. It had to be said that Lu Zidong's posture was very good. It was obvious that she had come into contact with this aspect before. Although the others also got down, their postures were very ugly. There were all kinds of crooked postures. However, it was also very good to have such an effect in less than a day. At the very least, their reaction speed was fast enough. Aju also got into position, but she did not immediately take the gun. Instead, she raised her head and looked at the target in the distance. Right at this moment, there was a bang. Lu Zidong had already fired the first shot, and the others also raised their long guns. There was a time limit in the shooting competition. There was a total of 5 bullets. The shorter the time, the higher the hit rate, and the winner would be the one who won. And now, Aju, who was 1 step behind the others, was obviously at a disadvantage. In addition, Lu Zidong's shooting had achieved a good score of 8 points. This was simply unbelievable for a female student. One had to know that many people could not even hit the target when they fired for the first time. It was not uncommon for them to miss the target directly or only hit the edge of the target. Therefore, there were not many people who could achieve Lu Zidong's result. Li Yanfeng was the first to applaud. Even Professor Liang could not help but say, not bad. At the same time, Aju directly placed the long gun on her body. She half lay on the grass and used her shoulders as support. She narrowed her eyes slightly and was so quiet that it was as if she was embedded in the ground. Shooting was not something that could be won just by being fast. Instead, he had to be as nimble as a rabbit and as still as a virgin, waiting for the right time to shoot. Vice Captain Zhang was still quite proud of himself as he straightened his back. Lu Zidong was his student. Lu Zidong's grades were good, which meant that he taught well. Thinking of this, he even deliberately looked in Bai Juan's direction. His tail was almost curled up. Bai Juan just smiled for some reason. At this time, Lu Zidong had already begun to adjust her breathing. She was ready to fire the second shot. As the saying goes, one can only shoot accurately with good aim. Her shot this time was definitely better than the previous one. With such confidence, Lu Zidong was just about to pull the trigger when she heard a bang. A bullet flew out from her left. Before he could finish speaking, a second sound was heard. Then it was the third, the fourth, the fifth. A total of 5 gunshots rang out magnificently. There was not even a chance to take a breather in between. That speed was so fast that it made people click their tongues. The wind rustled past their ears, and no one could react in time. After Lu Zitong heard such a result, the blood on her face almost faded away. She bit her lip heavily and angrily threw the gun to the ground. She had also shot 5 shots, but the first 8 points was already her best result. The rest of the shots did not break 7 points. She did not get first place, nor did she get second place. She barely managed to get third place, but the difference between her score and the previous one was not just a little bit. It was clear at a glance who had won and who had lost. The few girls from the performance department who were still showing off to the archaeology department a second ago immediately turned red in the face and neck. Chapter 1279. The archaeology department did not look at them. Instead, they hugged a Jew who was walking back. Their voices were filled with joy. Jew, you are indeed our department's cute pet. My boyfriend is off the charts. Come and give me a kiss. The girls were really kissing. They kissed Ju's big head. Ju reached out and touched her head. She raised her eyes and smiled. Her face was even more beautiful. Lu Zitong was so angry that she did not even care about the rules. She flung her hand and did not even pay attention to her good friends beside her. Her formation was also different from before. The young lady's temper was on the verge of exploding. The people from the performance department comforted her. This is nothing. Our total score is only a little lower than the archaeology department's. When the instructor goes on stage later, we will immediately catch up. After Lu Zitong heard this, her heart felt a little more at ease. Thinking about what her Uncle Li had said earlier, her gaze towards the front returned to its previous arrogance. Li Yanfeng, on the other hand, laughed out loud. Professor Liang, your University A is really full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. This little girl is not simple. 5 shots in a row is rare even in our army. As he spoke, he shifted his gaze to the instructors. All of you have to work hard. If you can't get a good result later and can't even compare to the students, it will be embarrassing. These words were a warning. Vice Captain Zhang naturally understood and immediately said, "Don't worry, Captain. Alright, you guys can go too." With Li Yanfeng's order, the whistle sounded, and more than 30 targets were pushed back another meter at the same time. The range of the instructors was originally farther than that of the students. This was set from the beginning. But Ajua did not know that. When she saw the targets move back 1 meter, she lowered her head and muttered, "I was wondering what was strange." It turned out that the distance was too close. That's right. The reason why Ajua didn't get 5-10 points was that this shooting distance was different from her usual shooting habits. At the beginning, she was also adjusting herself when she was looking at it. Other than Bai Juan, no one could see this point. That was why Master Bai showed a meaningful doting look. The roommate standing next to Ajua thought that she had heard wrongly. Are you saying that the distance just now was too close? That's right. Aju's face was serious. A heavy gun like this is suitable for a longer range. At such a close distance, it is actually more suitable to use a light gun like the K4 to aim. Aju's roommates were speechless. She sounded so professional. They were really dumbfounded. However, from what Aju said, it seemed that she would be able to hit more accurately if they were further away. All of a sudden, everyone felt their knees go weak. In the past, they only knew that Aju was very strong. Now, they realized that she was hiding a lot of things that they did not know at all. For example, her adoptive relationship with instructor Bai was very rare. Moreover, from the moment they entered the school until now, no one had seen Aju's parents. Other than her surname, it seemed that they did not know anything about Aju. For example, where was she from? There were some senior sisters who recognized her, but when they saw her, they all blushed and their hearts raced. It was as if she had seen her idol. So, what else did they not know about Aju? TSK Lu Zidong sneered. It sounds good, but it's not that easy to do. As expected, it's easy to talk. The further away you are, the more difficult it is to shoot. You even talked about heavy guns and light guns. Who are you trying to fool? As soon as she said this, Aju's roommates immediately retaliated. I really don't understand what right a loser has to talk about our Aju. Isn't her face swollen enough? You. Lu Zidong was so angry that her face turned a little green. Then, she saw the instructor standing there, checking the guns. The corners of her mouth curled up. What loser? It's not certain who will win or lose. Don't think that you can do anything just because of luck. The instructors haven't made a move yet. The instructors' shooting competition was a few more points than the students'. One of them was that they had to crawl forward with guns, and there would be 3 obstacles in front of them. Professor Liang's design was to let the students truly experience how the soldiers in the army usually trained, so that they could learn what hard work was. It had to be said that the teaching tradition of University A was indeed good, and the method was also right. However, with Vice Captain Zhang in it, what was supposed to be a demonstration was filled with the smell of gunpowder. Everyone, listen up. The sentry raised his left hand, and the whistle sounded. Let's go. With a clang. Everyone picked up the long spear on their right hand. Vice Captain Zhang's position was the best, and the angle of his rush out was also the best. The first obstacle was to climb over the fake wall. His strength was not bad. He held the gun in his right hand and clung to the wall with his left hand. After a few kicks, he climbed over. Vice Captain Zhang was a person with a lot of thoughts. In addition, the weather in the imperial capital was very dry. It had not rained for a few days, so the dust on the field was easily raised. Therefore, when they set off, while others were not paying attention, he deliberately used force with his feet and kicked the sand to the left. The people who set off from that position were none other than the problem soldiers of the archaeology department. Bai Zhuan took the lead. In order to protect his eyes, there was definitely a moment of pause. Therefore, the instructors on that side had already touched the wall, but the problem soldiers on this side were still in their original positions. Fuck, they actually cheated. Someone on the problem soldier's side was really fooled and rubbed their eyes with all their might. Because of such an action, Bai Zhuan was completely enraged. Everyone could see that the person whose eyes had been indifferent since he entered the school until now was releasing a vicious aura in his eyes. It was as if he had suddenly been touched by a poisonous snake or a fierce tiger. In an instant, he erupted with a speed that no one could have imagined. Only the problem soldiers knew why Bai Zhuan was like this. Every time they went out to carry out a mission, even if Master Bai was injured, he would try his best to ensure the safety of all of them. To him, while completing the mission, he would be able to let everyone return safely. Only then would he be able to live up to the people who had handed them over to him. But now, because of such a small competition, the other party actually made one of the people's eyes turn red. How could Vice Captain Zhang not know how important the eyes of a soldier were? Obviously, a person like Vice Captain Zhang did not feel guilty. At this moment, he was feeling confident that he could be the first to climb over the wall. However, at this moment, suddenly, a figure appeared on his left side. That person was like a cheetah with smooth lines. He had to use all his strength to hold on to the fake wall, but he took a step to the center. Then, he held a gun in his left hand and used his right arm as a support. With a long leg, he flipped over the fake wall and landed beautifully and handsomely. His movements were shockingly fast. Chapter 1280. When the sound of the wind came. Vice Captain Zhang finally saw the face of that figure clearly. Handsome, noble, incomparable. It was that Bai Juan. How could this be? How could his speed be so fast? Vice Captain Zhang's eyes were still swaying. On the other side, Bai Juan did not give him any time to think. He slid sideways and used his own impact to drill into the sand net. Then, he swept his long spear and aimed the muzzle at the bull's-eye in the distance. Whether it was his posture or the strength of holding the gun, he was so handsome that all the teachers and students widened their eyes. That kind of scene could really make people blush and their hearts beat faster. Cool. Aju, Instructor Bai is really too cool. When Aju heard this, she nodded in agreement. She had always known how handsome the little brother was. Although her shooting was also very fast and accurate, it was still different from the little brother. Not only was he fast and accurate, but he was also smooth. He guided like an arm and then gave the enemy a fatal blow. It was perfect without any flaws. Almost everyone present had an illusion. It was as if there was always a shooting line in Bai Juan's line of sight. Regardless of whether he had a gun in his hand or not, that line would always exist, as if it was real. He didn't need to think about these things. All he needed to do was to fire the gun. Bang! The bullet directly pierced through the target ring and hit the bull's eye. This was the first shot. Bang! The second shot followed. He was lying in that position with his shoulder pressed against the long spear. No matter where the target was or what position it changed, he would be able to hit the bull's eye. 10 points. 10 points. 10 points. The ring-counting member shouted until the end. His voice was trembling, and there was a sense of worship in his hoarse voice. All 10 points, full points. It was also 5 shots in a row. However, Bai Juan's 5 shots in a row were even faster than Aju's. Moreover, the tip of the spear was constantly adjusting its direction. This was because there were 2 targets that were moving back and forth. Even so, his movements were smooth from the beginning to the end. It was so beautiful that it could not be described with words. At that moment, other than the voice of the ring-counting member, almost everyone held their breaths. Bai Juan stood up from the ground with a long spear in one hand. His military uniform fluttered in the north wind, and his pale thin lips curved slightly. So many teachers and students could only think of one sentence: with a sweep of the spear, no one dares to come within 100 meters of our battle zone. It was not as simple as just being handsome. That kind of action seemed to be able to ignite the blood in her body. Proud and proud, he couldn't stop his heart from trembling. So, these are the soldiers of our Huaxia. Unyielding and unyielding, heroic spirit. Whoosh! There was no one to lead the applause. It was all spontaneous applause from the students. Bai Juan stood there with a long spear in his hand. His eyes were clear and handsome. Those eyes that were as deep as the sea, and that familiar scene instantly turned on the switch in Li Yanfeng's memory. 2 years ago, there was a rescue mission at the border. Just when he thought there was no way to save the hostages, a bullet fell from the sky and blew up the heads of 2 criminals in a row, giving them enough time to act. That kind of tricky angle was not something that any sniper could do. At that time, the only places around them that could be ambushed were trees. Moreover, in order to prevent them from having a sniper, the criminals used the hostages they were leaning against to block in front of them. They could not shoot at him at all. Even the students hissed, "What's wrong with this acting department's instructor? Isn't he lucky?" His hand slipped. "I'm really what excuse? Why didn't he say that he deliberately stepped on the ground when he started running?" Other students couldn't see it, but we who practice sports know very well what kind of move he used just now. It was clearly to harm Instructor Bai and the others' eyes. Damn. Such a person, fortunately, it's not our instructor. Vice Captain Zhang didn't expect that his words would have such a huge backlash. His face alternated between red and white, but he insisted on his mysterious self-confidence. "Captain Li, please give the order. The army can't lose so inexplicably. Everyone knows that our army's best skill is not long-range shooting, but close combat." Chapter 1281. Li Yanfeng did not hear Vice Captain Zhang's words clearly. His ears were buzzing, and he was still immersed in that unbelievable shock. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind. Was the person in front of him the Blade King that countless people worshipped? "Commander." Vice Captain Zhang was still gnashing his teeth. Li Yanfeng did not come back to his senses. Bai Zhuan, on the other hand, raised his eyes casually at this moment. His tone was also indifferent. "You mean, you want to fight with me?" "That's right." Vice Captain Zhang turned his head and said aggressively, "There are too many unstable factors in shooting. A real man is to fight with his fists and feet." Bai Zhuan glanced at him again and only said 2 words, "I'm not fighting." "Ha!" Vice Captain Zhang laughed mockingly. "Why not? Are you afraid? So that's all you have?" Bai Zhuan lowered his eyes and tidied up his sleeves. He said slowly, "Because you're too weak." His words did not have the slightest bit of emotion, but it made all the students of the archaeology department burst into laughter. Vice Captain Zhang's face was so red that it was almost dripping blood. As he spoke, he clenched his hands tightly and said angrily, "Captain Bai, aren't you afraid of blowing your own trumpet? We'll know who's weak after a fight. A fight is fine." Bai Zhuan seemed to have thought of something and suddenly curled his thin lips. "Bai Lijiu, step out." When Iju heard her name, her ears twitched. She took a big step forward and looked at Vice Captain Zhang with her eyes. She looked like a snoring little tiger that had smelled the smell of food. Her big round eyes were shining. Bai Zhuan smiled and made the final decision. "Let my student play with you." "You!" Vice Captain Zhang was so angry that his face was distorted. "What do you mean by this? Don't think that just because our army is well-mannered, we will be easily humiliated by you wild soldiers. Sending students out, are you mocking our army?" Bai Zhuan sneered. "Are you worthy of being in the army? So you're targeting me personally." Vice Captain Zhang was also an expert at distorting the truth. "You sent your students out to make me retreat, right? You're really shameless." When Iju heard this, her eyes narrowed and she directly stood in front of Bai Zhuan. She did not waste her breath with the other party. She exerted force with her left hand and directly grabbed Zhang's arm. Then, she exerted force again. Before Vice Captain Zhang could react, he heard a loud bang. His entire body was flung over a meter away by the force of the impact. His back slammed heavily into the wall, and blood gushed out from his throat. In that instant, the surrounding air seemed to have solidified. Aju's roommates widened their eyes and looked at her. Their jaws were about to drop. The students from the other faculties all gasped in shock. Vice Captain Zhang was sprawled on the ground. His internal organs were in unbearable pain, but the anger on his face lessened. He still wanted to stand up and continue. However, he heard voices coming from the side of his ears. What a terrible fall. He was dealt with in one move. How could such a person be an instructor? It's really funny. However, an ordinary girl wouldn't be able to carry such a big man, right? Strength isn't the main point. The main point is that her movements just now were too cool. Ha ha ha, that instructor from the performing arts department should be more honest now. Even the students are better than him. What else does he want? That's why people from the performing arts department only know how to brag. The students are like this, and the instructors are also like this. If you're willing to bet, you should accept your loss, but you still insist on asking for a rebuff. Isn't that Lu Zidong the same? Just now, she was still not convinced that Aju won. Now, look at Aju's skills. This last sentence not only made Vice Captain Zhang so embarrassed that he couldn't fight back, but it also directly stabbed Lu Zidong's spine. When she saw Bai Juan shoot, she was also shocked by that scene. The young girl's hazy good impression of him instantly turned into a strong liking. Although she knew that their department would lose because of this, she wasn't depressed. Her eyes had been on Bai Juan from the beginning to the end and had never left him. But it was different when Bai Lijiu made a move. This was simply a humiliation to her. Professor Liang. Lu Zidong seemed to be unable to hold it in any longer. She said passionately, "You are not allowed to disobey the instructor. This is the rule that you set up from the moment we entered the school." Now, Bai Lijiu openly made a move against the instructor without anyone's permission. This is already considered a violation of the school rules. We admit that we lost the competition. After all, there are many irresistible factors. However, we can't condone Bai Lijiu's actions. We hope that Professor Liang can reward and punish him. Such a student doesn't deserve to stay in University A at all. The last sentence was simply too much to the point that it was a little too much. However, Professor Liang couldn't say it directly. After all, the person sitting on his left was Li Yanfeng, and the person sitting on his right was President Liu. With these two people around, he couldn't criticize Lu Zidong in public. Moreover, the action had to be a fact. However, Professor Liang wouldn't punish a student just because of Lu Zidong's identity. Instead, he turned to Li Yanfeng and said, "What do you think of this matter, Commander Li?" Li Yanfeng's eyes had been looking at Bai Juan the whole time, but he hadn't spoken yet. The person on the other side laughed softly. "Miss Liu, what right do you have to say that someone doesn't deserve to stay in University A?" It was Bai Juan. His gaze was very cold, like ice in the 12th lunar month. His words were bone-chilling. "Is University A yours?" That gaze was too ruthless, as if it carried a strong smell of blood. It made Lu Zidong's hands and feet freeze. If I remember correctly, Aju is a special talent that University especially poached from abroad. After saying this, he raised his head and looked up. "Professor Liang, has University A changed its surname to Liu or Li? Why are you in such a dilemma?" When Professor Liang heard the words special talent, his heart skipped a beat, and his palms involuntarily began to sweat. Please don't let it be what he thought. Professor Liang. Bai Juan continued, "Perhaps you are too old and have forgotten. You should ask the Xiao family in detail who allowed Aju to appear here." As soon as the word Xiao family came out, Professor Liang immediately thought of another aristocratic family. The sweat in his palms became more and more intense. That one of the founding fathers of the nation. Wait a minute. Bai Juan. Professor Liang's legs suddenly went soft. You are. Bai Juan didn't look at him anymore. Instead, he placed his gaze on Li Yanfeng. His voice was as cold as ice. Commander Li, are you here to inspect the effect of the military training or to support your niece? Chapter 1282. Being asked such a question, Li Yanfeng's body trembled. He had a very bad premonition. However, Lu Zidong was used to being arrogant. When she heard Bai Juan's words, her anger rose. When did my uncle support me? It's wrong for a student to hit an instructor. Instructor Bai can't possibly use such a set of excuses to slander my uncle Li just because something happened to his own student. I admit that ever since I entered this school, I've always done what the other students did. I've never done anything special. A student hit an instructor. Bai Juan's voice was very cold. How did Miss Lu get into University A? Is there a problem with her ability to express herself, or is she deliberately trying to confuse the public? After being an actress for a long time, she is like a paparazzi. Why do you have to twist the obvious? Vice Captain Zhang wanted to fight, and Zhou accepted the challenge. This is the truth. Vice Captain Zhang had already stood up at this time. When he heard Bai Juan's words, he sneered, Zhou. You call her so intimately. An instructor being so close to a student is already a violation of the military rules and discipline. Now, you want to bite our Li Tuan when there's a problem. You're dreaming. When those soldiers heard Vice Captain Zhang's words, they also jumped up and down. Bai Juan, can you be responsible for your own words? If you slander Li Tuan, even if you are not from our army, Li Tuan has the right to remove your military status now. Bai Juan raised his eyebrows and smiled. Hai Lu, give Uncle Li a call and ask him when a regiment commander of the army has the right to remove our military status. Master Bai, don't. Don't you know my old man's temper? If anyone dares to touch my military status, he will chase them all over the courtyard. But if Regiment Commander Li really wants to compete with us in terms of family background. Li Hailu glanced around. Q-boy, ask your mother to control their army. The person called Q-boy was the youngest in the problem army, and of course, he was also the most foppish. Originally, they were here to pretend to be military training, so their numbers could not be revealed. However, the other party insisted on suppressing them. Then let's see who can suppress who more. The child did not waste time. He directly took out his phone and made a call. On the other side, the valiant female chief was sitting in her office, conducting a map of the battle analysis. The adjutant beside her came over and said, Madam, it's young master, young master. When the female director heard this, she immediately took the phone and said, Why are you calling me? This wasn't normal. Where are you now? Let me tell you, after you become a soldier, you better like girls and you're not allowed to hang around in a brothel anymore, do you understand? Do you need money in the army? I'll ask your Uncle Wang to send it to you. You're still growing, so tell me what you want. If there's anything you want, you can come to the army. I'll bring you to eat good food. Now that your face is so thin, even your grandfather's heart aches when he sees it. You have to understand your father. He sent you to the army because he wanted you to become straight. How could you not come home for 2 years? Usually, you just call 1 or 2 times. Mom. Q-boy fair and tender, I'm on speaker. When the female department head heard this, she immediately fell silent. However, Li Yanfeng could still recognize the voice of the person on the other end of the phone. That is, their department head. Without giving Li Yanfeng a chance to react, Q-boy directly said, Mom, your army has a regiment commander surnamed Li. Now, he has come to my military training school. He wants to support his niece. Those soldiers in your regiment even want to revoke my and Master Bai's military status. Now, as the head of the amphibious army, I will remove Zhang Zhiyong and the others' qualifications to join the amphibious army. Their original military status will be removed. Also, we have never been a wild army. As soon as the name of the amphibious army was said, the entire army was shaken as well. This was because this army was not only the concentration camp for the selection of the special forces in the country, but also the gathering place of the military's connections. That was the army that all soldiers dreamed of joining. However, such an army was not something that ordinary people could enter. Only those who were outstanding in all aspects were qualified to join. Chapter 1283. But what did Bai Jun say just now? He said that he was the head of the amphibious army. The head of the amphibious army, in other words. In just an instant, Vice Commander Zhang's originally unconvinced face completely lost its arrogance. His face turned pale white. Not only him, but even the other army soldiers were all stunned on the spot. Clang! The gun in his hand fell heavily to the ground. They never would have thought that the wild army that they had always mocked would actually come from the amphibious army. What was even more unexpected was Bai Jun's identity. Li Yanfeng was the first person to react, but his reaction was not because of the amphibious army, but because he knew more than these soldiers, the top secret information that could not be said. Young Master Bai. Li Yanfeng wanted to explain, but when he met Bai Jun's gaze, it was as if he was frozen. Most of the students did not know what had happened, but there was a small portion of them whose families were also connected to the army. When they heard Bai Jun's words, their blood immediately boiled. Amphibious army. Heavens! I'm not dreaming, right? I can actually see people from the amphibious army in my lifetime. This time, it was really worth it to go to university. Wait a minute, is the amphibious army very awesome? Of course they're awesome. I'll explain it to you like this. Look at the army, they're only awesome on land. The Air Force is good at aerial warfare, but what about the amphibious army? That's a comprehensive battle. They know how to fight, tank, missile, and even taxi. Moreover, they have to be outstanding in all three aspects. Some even know how to input information. In other words, they can be used as hackers at critical moments to hack into the local combat information database. Don't you think they're awesome? This is a hidden army that only the military knows about. Fuck, why do I feel like I'm watching a movie? I also feel that it's unbelievable. I heard from my father that the amphibious army doesn't come out of the mountains easily. Why would they come to our University A for military training? This is simply a pie falling from the sky. No wonder Instructor Bai and the others have been unwilling to talk about their own troops. They are so awesome. They must be afraid that we will be proud if they tell us. Ha ha ha. But some people don't think that way. They insist on treating others low profile as incompetence. This time, Instructor Zhang should be dumbfounded. He keeps mocking Instructor Bai and the others because he is an official army soldier. That student Liu from the Performing Arts Department is also a weirdo. He doesn't want to admit his loss. He wants to go back on his words just because he has uncle's support. The people of the amphibious force are not people that any random guild leader can control. This time, it's a slap in the face, it's really loud. Hearing this, all the soldiers of the army blushed. However, none of them could say a word. Especially those who had mocked Bai Jun, they were even more embarrassed. Lu Zitong, who was at the side, didn't know what the concept of the amphibious force was at first. After hearing the explanation, her heart started to tremble. This time, she was very likely to implicate Uncle Lee. No. We can't just bide our time like this. If she didn't come up with a solution soon, Uncle Lee's position would be gone. Bye, instructor, bye. Lu Zitong had a pitiful look on her face. Her eyes were slightly red. Everyone subconsciously wants to protect their loved ones. I believe that you soldiers know this feeling the best. Ever since Uncle Lee entered the school, he has never given me any special privileges, nor has he had any intention of supporting me. Instructor Bai is from the archaeology department. I can understand why Instructor Bai has made such a decision now, but military status is too important for a soldier. Vice Captain Zhang doesn't know Instructor Bai's identity. It's just that his words are a little offensive, but that's also because we're on opposite sides. Vice Captain Zhang wants to win wholeheartedly. Instructor Bai is also a soldier. I want to ask Instructor Bai to understand the difficulties of a soldier. When Vice Captain Zhang heard that someone was speaking up for him, his originally dead heart was rekindled. So what if he was from the amphibious force? The more a person from the amphibious force was, the more they had to weigh the pros and cons. They couldn't just casually revoke his military status. Thinking of this, Vice Captain Zhang deliberately took off the military hat on his head, as if he was very heroic. Forget it, who asked me to meet a legendary soldier? I, an ordinary person, can't compare to someone who has connections. I admit defeat. Vice Captain Zhang said, in order to gain sympathy. His eyes were red. I just hope that the students present can understand. Commander Lee didn't do anything wrong, but he still has to be implicated with me. It really shouldn't be. Also, no matter what the outcome is in the future, I want to say that I am worthy of this military uniform on my body. Hearing this, Bai Zhuan looked at him and suddenly tilted his head and smiled. With a handsome movement, he raised his right hand and straightened his long spear, pointing it directly at Vice Captain Zhang's head. Even his eyes were filled with a fierce hostility. You said that you are worthy of this military uniform on your body. This is just a competition, not for you to go on the battlefield to kill the enemy. Ordinary students don't know how important a soldier's eyes are to a soldier, but how can you not know? How can you use such a despicable method like stepping on sand? If a soldier's eyes are crippled, it means that his entire life is crippled. You said that you are worthy of this military uniform on your body. A real soldier never cares about credit, but what have you done? In order to win, for your own face, you actually did such a thing. A person like you, not to mention being afraid of things and not daring to go on the battlefield, even if you go on the battlefield, you will only betray your comrades. Zhang, if you were in my army, do you think I would still talk to you about disbanding your military status? I will kill you with one shot. As he spoke, Bai Zhuan turned to the left and looked at Lu Zitong. His side profile was as handsome as before, but it was as cold as a glacier. And you, a person who ignored the rules in school because of his family's ability, and a person who began to imply that others used their privilege after losing the competition, what right do you have to say such words as understanding? When I think of a person like you under our protection, the gun in my hand is not willing. At that moment, time seemed to have flowed backward. In order to protect a Jew, Bai Zhuan did not care about the consequences at all and pulled out his gun in the military compound. Now, he was still doing it to protect. However, the range of protection was wider. While removing the malignant tumor, he was already strong enough to bear any consequences. This was the Bai Zhuan who had grown up. He was full of righteousness and was fearless. Chapter 1284. All the students in the school were watching this scene, and their blood was boiling with indescribable passion. Not only the girls, but even the boys could not resist the aura that Bai Juan brought out at that moment. Although Vice Commander Zhang was a soldier, he was as timid as a mouse. He had never had a gun pointed at his head before. Now that he was facing the black muzzle of the gun, his expression changed. He was afraid that Bai Juan would really shoot. His legs began to tremble, and he was so scared that he almost knelt on the ground. With such a miserable appearance, there was no need for anyone to say anything. The students had already made a judgment in their hearts. Just as Instructor Bai had said, Zhang was not worthy of being a soldier at all. When the army saw him like that, they also felt embarrassed. Especially those few army soldiers who were standing tall and straight. They turned their heads away and did not want to look at him at all. Lu Zidong's original plan instantly vanished into thin air. Her head was buzzing. She clearly saw the disgust in the eyes of her classmates. Lu Zidong was anxious and subconsciously called Li Yanfeng, Uncle Li. She did not expect Li Yanfeng to interrupt her fiercely, "Don't say any more." Lu Zidong was shocked by that voice. Li Yanfeng was not even in the mood to pay attention to her. He turned his head and said to Bai Juan, "I am willing to accept all of young Master Bai's decisions." Lu Zidong was shocked again when she heard that. Vice Commander Zhang could not hold on any longer. His knees went soft and he knelt on the ground. He had never been so embarrassed before. The students from the performance department did not have the face to raise their heads again. After this shooting competition, Vice Commander Zhang left. The trending topic that Lu Zidong had painstakingly bought was not used. Instead, it was Bai Juan who said to Li Hailu at the last moment, "Let the Xiao family investigate what happened to University A this year. How did some unnecessary students get in?" Lu Zidong's history was dug up in an instant. If her grades were not good enough, she would definitely be kicked out of school. How could Lu Zidong be convinced? She still wanted her father to torment her. Li Hailu did not hide it. He smiled at Lu Zidong and said, "It's fine if you don't admit it after doing something wrong, but you even set your sights on a Jew and want the professor to expel her. By doing this, it's obvious that you want Master Bai to kill you. He won't have any feelings for someone who bullies a Jew. Of course, you can continue to play those little tricks of yours after you leave the school. Don't blame me for not warning you. If you continue to play, your Lu family will be uprooted. Your father is also beside you. In this regard, you can consult your father more. Ask him, is the Lu family comparable to the Bai family?" At this time, Lu Xian had already realized which Bai family Li Hailu was talking about. A layer of sweat instantly overflowed from his forehead. He finally understood why his old friend would listen to the other party's orders so obediently. He also understood why Professor Liang was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Not to mention the Bai family, they could not afford to offend the Xiao family. However, Lu Zidong did not understand. She tugged at Lu Xian's sleeve and was about to make a fuss. "Dad, I can't just be driven out like this. Help me find some connections. Our family knows so many people. Uncle Li can't do it, but there's still Uncle Zhang and the others. There has to be one more powerful than this Instructor Bai." There was a crisp slap. Lu Xian was afraid that Lu Zidong would say something else and completely anger the other party. He slapped her in the face. When had Lu Zidong ever been slapped like this? And it was in front of all the students. She covered her face and was almost dumbfounded. Lu Xian roared in a low voice, "Do you know who the other party is? Why are you yelling about looking for someone? Is this how I usually teach you? Go and apologize to young Master Li and young Master Bai for what you just said." Lu Zidong was yelled at by her father. Only then did she realize that the other party's identity might have already exceeded her imagination. She quickly turned her head to look at Baizhuan. With tears in her eyes, she wanted to speak. However, Baizhuan did not even look at her. He walked back to the archaeology department. All the teachers and students in the school were watching from the side. Lu Zidong was really in an extremely sorry state. Lu Xian saw that Baizhuan did not want to pay attention to them, so he did not dare to say anything. He quickly pulled his daughter out of the school. From then on, the father and daughter never dared to step into University A. At the same time, the students also realized that their instructors did not seem to have simple identities. Just when they thought that after this matter was over, the school would definitely change a batch of instructors for them, but they did not expect that Baizhuan and the others were still there. This made the enthusiasm of the young men and women for military training even higher. Seeing Baizhuan was like seeing a Prince Charming on TV. The archaeology department was undoubtedly the happiest. Every student was smiling like a flower. Aju, hurry up and tell me. What's your brother Bai's height in 3 measurements? There are people on the internet who want it. I think we should get Instructor Bai to sign an autograph for each of us. The righteousness of our Prince Charming must be preserved forever. That's a good idea. Wait a minute, what's going on? Someone on the forum is asking about Instructor Bai's family background. They even asked if he has a boyfriend now. Seeing this, the people from the archaeology department collectively looked at Aju, who was chewing on a steamed bun in her mouth. Their gossipy souls suddenly burned. Aju, tell me a little. What kind of girl does my Prince Charming like? There are many people who want this information now. The topic on the forum is especially hot. Aju's round tiger eyes rolled around. Then, she thought for a moment. What kind of girl did little brother like? Those who are strong, easy to raise, and have white skin. Just as she said that, she stretched out her hand and pointed. That direction. Astonishment was pointing at her little nose. Everyone in the archaeology department laughed out loud. Aju, are you referring to yourself? All right, we know that no one will not like our cute pet, let alone your brother Bai. But to be honest, what kind of girl does Instructor Bai like? I don't think he has ever specially looked at anyone. How about we leave this mission to Aju to find out? The entire class unanimously decided to let Aju be the spy. Who asked her to have a good relationship with Instructor Bai? Only the few roommates who knew the inside story looked at each other and almost spat out the rice in their mouths. You let the white steamed bun that Instructor Bai wanted to eat the most ask what Instructor Bai liked to eat. This was completely a trap for Aju. White steamed bun was the new nickname given to Aju by the roommates. When they heard that the little sister was going to risk her life for the sake of the majority of students, they all patted Aju's head. You can do it. You have to make good use of your strength. But even if you don't make use of your strength, it's fine. After all, Instructor Bai is so handsome. Aju. Chapter 1285. On the same day, Aju returned to the apartment with a mission. When she pushed open the door, she smelled the aroma of rice, as if something was being stir-fried. Alaska was squatting there, wagging its tail, trying its best to act cute toward the owner in the kitchen. Baizhuan did not change into his military uniform. He stood there tall and straight, flipping the pot in his hand. When he heard the sound of the door opening, he raised his eyes and smiled at Aju. Only then did Aju see clearly that it was her favorite water spinach. Her tiger eyes were immediately fixed on it, and she stood there in a daze, waiting for Baizhuan to feed her. Baizhuan seemed to have seen the little monk from when he was young again. His eyes were full of smiles, but he was afraid that he would burn Aju, so he used his chopsticks to pick up a piece of water spinach and blew on it before feeding it to Aju. After eating her favorite food, Aju was so happy that her ears pricked up. She was really a canine. It was not an exaggeration to call her a little tiger. Baijuan also liked to raise such a little tiger. Just seeing it made people feel good. Although Aju was a foodie, she was not idle. Knowing that the dishes were about to be served, she took a plate and a bowl and even poured milk for Baijuan. When Baijuan came out with the last dish, he saw that the dishes were placed very well, and the rice was scooped into the bowl. That kind of warmth was just waiting for him. When the milk entered the stomach, it was warm. For 3 days in a row, Baijuan was dealing with the trivial matters after his identity was exposed, so he did not return to the apartment. After returning today, he saw that the room was filled with Aju's things. He could not help but laugh, and he did something that he would never do normally, which was to show off. After the photo was sent to the WeChat circle, Li Hailu was the first to comment, "I really didn't expect you to be like this, Master Bai. Are you trying to let the whole world know?" Following that was the envy, jealousy, and hatred of the problem legions. Finally, there was Xiaolin's message, "Tell Aju that I miss her." Baijuan narrowed his eyes, moved his finger, and chose to delete this message. Xiaolin was speechless. "You are really? How can Aju stand you?" Baijuan replied calmly, "She is drinking soup beside me now." Xiaolin was speechless. Master Bai was really inhuman when he showed off his love. It was not convenient to say more in the comments. Xiaolin gave him a call. Baijuan looked at the screen and suddenly smiled. He directly handed the phone to Aju. "It's Xiaolin. I'm too dirty. I'm going to run the bath water first. You guys can chat." Aju did not suspect anything and immediately took it. In order to reward her, Baijuan specially fed her an apple. Although Aju did not know why her little brother wanted to reward her, she instinctively felt that it was a reward. "Hey!" When Xiaolin heard the voice of a young girl on the other end, he thought that he had heard wrongly. He confirmed the number again and then thought of Baijuan's WeChat message just now. He quickly smiled. "Aju? It's me. Brother Xiaolin, how have you been recently?" After Aju heard that familiar laughter, she became even happier. "I miss you so much." The two of them chatted on the phone. In the end, Xiaolin realized that something was wrong. "Aju, where's your little brother?" With Master Bai's jealousy, it was impossible for him to let Aju talk to him on the phone for so long, right? "He went to run the bath water." This sentence revealed too much information. Xiaolin, who had been an experienced driver since he was young, looked at the dark sky outside and thought about the current relationship between Baijuan and Aju. As Baijuan wished, he coughed heavily and said, "Since you guys are busy, then that's all for now. When you have time another day, let's get together." Brother Xiaolin will bring you to eat delicious food. After saying that, Xiaolin hung up the phone. Aju was still a little confused. Baijuan saw the opportunity and walked over. He chuckled. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Brother Xiaolin told us to get busy first." Aju frowned in confusion. "But I didn't say that I was busy. It's so strange." Baijuan took the phone from her hand and easily found an excuse for Xiaolin. "He's probably busy." Of course, he would not tell Aju what Xiaolin was thinking. "Be good, go take a shower first." Baijuan pushed Aju into the bathroom. Aju was smart. As soon as she was drenched, she realized why Xiaolin said that. What she said just now was too ambiguous. Could it be that Brother Xiaolin thought that she and Baijuan had done something bad? Thinking of this, the little tiger, who had always been a good boyfriend, could not help but blush a little. So much so that after taking a shower, when she lay on her bed, the heat had not subsided yet. Seriously speaking, this was the first time she had spent the night in the same room as Baizhuan since she left the Bai family. Phew, she would try her best not to violate her sexual guard anyway. Fortunately, Baizhuan still had a guest room here. Otherwise, if they slept in the same bed, her resistance would definitely be greatly reduced. Thinking of this, Aju reached out and covered her face with the quilt. However, her heart could not be controlled. It was beating wildly, and even the pulse on her body was a little fast. It was not like her usual self at all. The blood flowing in her veins had also become sticky, as if it was oozing sugar. However, even if she wrapped herself up completely, she could not hide some inexplicable feelings. It seemed that the mission could only be completed tomorrow. In any case, she could not see Baizhuan's face that could cause people to commit crimes anymore. However, when she finally calmed down a little, the door was open from the outside. She did not need to think to know who it was. Other than her, there was only, "I wanted to drink just now, but who knew that the wine bottle would fall?" The bed and blanket over there were wet, so I could only come over to sleep. "Aju, do you mind sharing half of the bed with Baizhuan?" Baizhuan's upper body was naked, and he was holding a pillow in his left hand. His eyes were as deep as the deep sea. When he met Aju's gaze, the corners of his mouth seemed to be smiling. Normally, Aju would not mind. But now, she was afraid that a rabbit like her would pounce on Baizhuan. She was still thinking of a reason to refuse. However, it was obvious that Baizhuan did not intend to hear a negative answer. After asking, he walked to the bedside, placed the pillow there, and lay down as well. That man's breath that was difficult to ignore assaulted her face, making her feel defenseless. Aju's tiger eyes widened. She did not know why, but her hands and feet felt a little hot and soft. Especially when Baizhuan lay down and spoke, that warmth swept past her ears bit by bit. That feeling was even more obvious. It was soft and numb. Chapter 1286. What are you thinking about? Baizhuan turned his handsome face to the side and asked the person beside him. That pair of eyes was a little too beautiful in the night. The distance was too close, so close that Aju could touch his bare chest with just a move of her fingers. It was really a strange feeling. He was completely different from when he was young. He was so firm, full of tension, and well-defined muscles. All of these meant that the little brother had already become a man. Aju was like a tiger, growling in her throat. Seeing that she did not speak, Baizhuan raised his eyebrows. He stretched out his slender fingers and moved the corner of the blanket in front of her away. His voice was very pleasant. "How many times have I told you not to cover your face with the blanket when you sleep? It's not good for your respiratory tract." Without the cover of the blanket, Aju only felt that every part of her cells was being invaded by that aura, and her heartbeat was also in chaos. However, those good-looking thin lips and chin were swaying in front of her eyes. She really wanted to be kissed just like that. No. She could not be so reckless. She had to restrain herself. Aju told herself domineeringly that she could not bully the little brother just because she was strong. Baizhuan glanced at her and saw her clenching her hands. He knew that she would already feel uncomfortable because of his proximity. His eyes darkened. It seemed that 3 years was indeed a distance. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Baizhuan looked at the person beside him with a smile. The wine had already been poured, so of course it would not be wasted. He and Aju did not need to sleep in 2 rooms. Aju also wanted to say something, so that she could divert her attention from the little brother's abs. But what should she say? Oh right, her mission. Little brother, there's a question. My classmate wants me to ask you, Aju said mysteriously. This made Baizhuan curious. What question? What kind of girl do you like? As soon as Aju said this, she saw that her little brother's gaze had changed. It was as if he was a little cold. He just looked at her like that, and the corners of his mouth curled up. Aju, under normal circumstances, I don't like you to ask such questions on behalf of others. Baizhuan reached out and pinched Aju's chin. It seemed to mean that she should not ask again in the future. Otherwise, he might be unhappy. Was this a rejection? Aju said blankly, actually, I'm not asking on behalf of others. I also want to know. Hearing this, Baizhuan suddenly laughed. His waistline on the side carried a seductive undulation in the night. If Aju wants to know, then she definitely has to say it. First of all, she has to be strong. He was right. Aju's eyes lit up. She immediately raised her fingers and began to count. 1, Baizhuan raised his eyebrows. What does 1 mean? Don't worry about it, little brother. Just continue speaking. He looked more serious than ever. Baizhuan looked at her, and his smile became even wider. There was a heavy doting look in his eyes. Your skin is very white. 2. Aju looked very happy. One could see the happiness in her dull tiger eyes. Is there anything else? Also, the template was right in front of him, so it was not difficult for Baizhuan to think about it. He recalled a little. Their brains are slow, so it's easier to raise them. Aju subconsciously retorted, I'm not stupid. Baizhuan suddenly paused and lifted her chin with his finger. His eyes sparkled. You know. I knew it before. Aju frowned worriedly and said, I just don't know if little brother has changed now. I'm not stupid. But when they ask me what kind of girl you like, I'm referring to me. Baizhuan's heart trembled when he heard Aju's words. His voice and thin lips both lowered. It's never changed. But Aju, do you like the same as me? In just an instant, the air in Aju's chest seemed to have been sucked out. Little brother's lips, which made people want to kiss him, were very close to her. They were so close that even her breath could hit his lips. However, he did not kiss her. It was such a close distance that made people feel hot all over. Aju wanted to withdraw, but her chin was fixed by him. He was so domineering. He was not like his usual self at all. Be good, tell little brother, do you like the same as me? That kind of posture was extremely seductive. Every word he said and the breath he exhaled brushed against her lips bit by bit. There was some tingling and numbness that made people's hearts tighten. Aju gripped the quilt in her palm. For some reason, her breath also softened. It should be the same. Oh. Before she could finish her sentence, Baizhuan's lips fell. At the beginning, he did not kiss her very deeply. Instead, he held her lips and kissed them bit by bit. Aju still wanted to push him away. Then, Baizhuan used his strength and hugged her waist and pressed down heavily. Aju's entire body was numb. Her mind was blank, and she could only passively follow Baizhuan. At that moment, Baizhuan's true form was revealed. It was probably because he had yearned for it for too long. After removing the gentle shell, it was a strong possessiveness. Aju always had a way to make him go crazy. As early as when he was enlightened, she was an existence that made him unable to resist. Many nights, he hid the most survival thoughts in the bathroom. He wanted to hug her, invade her, and make her completely belong to him. He wanted her so much that his body hurt. But he didn't dare to tell her. He was so worried that she would discover his secret. Now, he finally didn't have to worry anymore. His adieu was his from the beginning to the end. Sensing that Baijun's strength had increased, Adieu's fist involuntarily stretched out. With a swoosh. Fortunately, it was Baijun. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be punched out. Baijun tilted his head and pressed her down with his hand. For some reason, a thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. It was as if even the black hair in front of him was wet. He looked down at Adieu from above. Both of their breaths were very chaotic, and they could not control the sweetness of it. Adieu also saw her fist. She was stunned for a moment before she explained gloomily, "If I said that it was just a conditioned reflex, would you believe me?" "Yes." Baijun bent down and kissed her lips. He pressed her wrist with one hand and said in a deep voice, "But you almost hit me just now, so you have to tell me, what's your next conditioned reflex action?" Adieu thought for a moment and decided to tell her little brother honestly, "I'll probably lift you up and throw you under the bed." Baijun was speechless. Some information and short stories will be published on the public account. Zankisho. Chapter 1287. Seeing that what she said was true, Baijun really couldn't hold it in anymore. He lowered his eyes and pressed it against Adieu's forehead. He let out a long sigh. "You didn't have this habit in the past. Why do you have it now?" "Big brother and second brother trained me. It's like a psychological cue. They said that if anyone dares to approach me in the future, I will throw them out of bed." Adieu's small brows also furrowed. "Big brother also said that this way, it can prevent me from violating the precepts of lust. Moreover, at that time, he also emphasized that I should be wary of Baijun." Hearing this, Baijun completely understood that his two extremely smart brothers-in-law were originally targeting him. If it were anyone else, Adieu would have already started beating them up. To be honest, if Adieu really made a move, even he did not have the confidence to suppress her strength. However, Master Bai's greatest advantage was that he was not shocked by honor or disgrace. Even if he already knew that this special training was targeted at him, he could still treat it as if this matter was not targeted at him. He was very calm. "Your big brother asked you to be wary of other people with the surname Bai. Am I someone else?" Adieu shook her head. She felt that something was wrong. However, Baijun's overly handsome face was too close to her. His legs, which were wearing military pants, rubbed against her little by little. Adieu could not even concentrate on her thoughts, let alone consider whether it was right or not. Baijun reached out and wrapped his arms around her waist. He kissed her ear from the side. Could it be that in Adieu's heart, I am still someone else? No, no. Adieu trembled. Her hand involuntarily hugged Baijun's arm. She wanted to maintain her voice, but her face was red and her tailbone was numb. Even her words were intermittent. Seeing this, Baijun's fingers forcefully tore open the buttons of her pajamas. Then, one kiss after another followed. It was so densely packed that it made one's entire body burn. His back was very good-looking. Even in the dark night, Adieu could feel the strength of Zhang Yang. It had a very stimulating effect. He kissed her neck gently, and even his breath was hot. Adieu had never experienced this before. She could only grab Baijun's arm like that. Her lips were about to break from biting. Baijun's heart ached when he saw this. He gently kissed her lips. His fingers covered the softness that he had dreamed of. Little brother. Adieu couldn't take it anymore. She reached out and hugged Baijun's neck. Baijuan's kiss slowed down. The voice that was attached to her ear was bewitching. Is it comfortable? Aju could not say anything. She felt as if her entire body had turned into water. The delicate skin was at his fingertips. The smooth touch was more than 10 times better than what he had imagined. The color in Baijuan's eyes grew darker and darker. It was so dark that just when Aju thought that he would take her at all costs. However, he suddenly stopped kissing her collarbone, burying his head in her neck. Aju's face was already red and her tongue was dry. Her face was at a loss after the joy. Undoubtedly, on this day, the little brother gave her a lot of happiness. A joy that belonged to a young girl. However, she did not understand. Why did he stop? Was little brother asking her to retaliate against him? However, Baijuan didn't think so. After a while, he seemed to smile and reached out to touch her head. All right, go to sleep. I'll go next door to see if there are any other quilts. After saying that, he really stood up. Aju lay on the bed, looking at the ceiling with her 2 round tiger eyes. Woof, woof, woof. He didn't even give her a chance to retaliate. Why? After Baijuan left the bedroom, his first reaction was not to get a quilt. Instead, he strode into another bathroom and turned on the shower without thinking. He did not care how cold the water was and started to flush himself. That part of his military pants was already a little swollen. He almost doubted whether he would be able to control himself if this continued. After all, that feeling was too wonderful. She was in his arms, her face red as he rubbed her. Damn it. A certain part of his body did not have any intention of disappearing. Instead, because of his recollection, it grew bigger. Baijuan lowered his eyes. His black hair with water droplets fell down, but it could not hide his fierce eyes. He stretched out his right hand, followed by waves of deep panting. Aju lay on the bed, her body still emitting an unusual residual heat. She tossed and turned again. She did not know if this counted as breaking her sexual abstinence. Aju sat down cross-legged. Her long black hair was spread on the bed, but her heart was still a little tight. She thought about it carefully. She did not reject anything that her little brother did to her. She also liked to be with her little brother. Since he still liked her now, did that mean that she could become his wife in the future? If she was not sure, she would settle this matter first. Although this was a little unfair to Buddha Wooly, Buddha was loved by so many people. Her little brother had always been alone since he was young. She could not let go of her little brother. After thinking this through, Aju immediately became energetic. Her round eyes were very bright. Baijuan came back after taking a cold shower and saw this scene. He had been gone for less than an hour. After such a long time, he thought that Aju had already fallen asleep. He did not expect to see a little wild cat. Why aren't you sleeping? This time, Baijuan did not sleep directly beside Aju like last time. Instead, he took another thin blanket to avoid skin-to-skin contact. He was afraid that he would not be able to hold it in. Aju smiled. That kind of eyebrows always made people feel that it was suffocating. Baijuan was once again glad that he was able to return to Aju's side when he was supposed to. Otherwise, with such a face, it was inevitable that some blind people would come over. He hated anyone who had thoughts about Aju. I'm waiting for you, little brother. As Aju said this, she tilted her head. Just now, you said that you still like me, right? Baijuan looked at her seriously, looking for him to confirm. He could not help but laugh. He even could not help but kiss her cheek. Yes, I will only like you for the rest of my life. It was undeniable that when she heard the word for the rest of her life, Aju's heart was really sweet. However, she had not forgotten the business that she needed to settle. Since you like me, and I like you too, then you should marry me tomorrow. It is a modern sweet novel. The female and male protagonists are both very handsome. I hope to see a familiar beauty appear. Today, I will discuss with Gue Gue and the others to see what kind of new book activity we will do. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.